Notre Dame fans, welcome to a special edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. A special edition that's going to be a regular edition, which is our Wednesday night recruiting show. And so we're going to talk some recruiting night. We're going to dive into some film tonight. We are going to talk about Notre Dame's 2023 secondary class. So the commits that are in the class, obviously that is cornerback Justyn, Rhett. So we'll go kind of position by position, and then alphabetical within each position. So we'll go cornerbacks first, and we'll go Justyn, Rhett first, and then we will go into safeties. We'll do Peyton Bowen first, and then Adon, Shuler. So great start for Notre Dame. But Ryan, before we dive into that, I just want to address some things that are kind of going on in Notre Dame Nation.
Sure.
And that is the open tight end position, which if you're a member of the Irish Breakdown message board, you've kind of known where this is at for several hours now, which is Notre Dame has not hired a tight ends coach yet. Okay, there are still, they're still working on some things, but they have zeroed in on a candidate that they want, that they expect to hire. And that would be, I've been trying to figure out all day how to say his name. It's Gerad Parker is how you say it. It's Gerad. So I didn't know if it was, okay, is it Jared? Is it Gerard? I thought it was Gerard at first. I didn't notice that there wasn't the second R. But it's Gerad Parker, who is currently spent the last 2 years as the offensive coordinator at West Virginia. I believe it was as an offensive coordinator in sort of a head coach calls the plays type situation, I believe, is kind of how that was. But was with David Cutcliffe at Duke for 2 years before that. Was going to be at Cincinnati in 2017, but there was a situation that came up that he didn't coach there that year. But before that, he had coached for 5 years at Purdue, where he was on the same staff as Marcus Freeman. So that's kind of where they got to know each other. He was a running backs coach for 2 years, then a tight ends coach for 2 years. He's also coached receivers. He was the receivers coach at West Virginia and at Duke, and he was a recruiting coordinator for 4 years at Purdue as well. So we'll dive more into him when we get the word that he has accepted the job. And so, and all the other stuff has been worked out. So it's not official yet. We'll get it. But we, like I said, barring a snag coming up, we expect it to happen. But until all the snags have been kind of, worked through, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. But we're here to talk recruiting, Ryan. And coming into this year, I think secondary, if you're going to like lump things into like holes, right? So like linebacker rover is one, D tackle into one, that kind of thing. I would argue that secondary is without question the most important, biggest need. You have to do well on the entire defense, and is right up there with kind of quarterback and receiver for different reasons for the most important in the class. They need a home run secondary class if they're going to really close that gap on that level. And Ryan, so far so good.
Yeah, no, and we if you joined us for the show on Monday, where I think you had hopped off already, and me and Vince were on there, and I did highlight defensive backs in my mailbag from this week as a point of emphasis for the class, because like you said, I mean, coming out of the 2022 season, this could potentially be Cam Hart's final season, could potentially be Brandon Joseph's final season, definitely going to be Houston Griffith's final season, definitely going to be DJ Brown's final season. So there's a lot of turnover that's potentially going to happen in the secondary. And let's be honest, outside of, just losing those players in the pretty near future, there's also like, hey, we need to upgrade the quarterback spot on the other side of Cam Hart. We need to make sure that our safety depth moving forward, the young safety depth is ready to go. So there's a lot of moving parts to it. And I think that obviously the attrition of losing a few guys after 2022 is why it's such a paramount position to fill. And it's also a phenomenal start, like you said, because we'll talk about it a lot tonight. The two safeties we got in this class, Adon, Shuler, Peyton Bowen, I feel like they could play well together. We'll talk about that fit, how they could potentially fit together, down the road potentially. Justyn, Rhett, upgrading the cornerback position is always a good spot. And now I think that they really are in a position with where they have started in the defensive back class, where now they can really shoot for some of those higher regarded prospects, the guys that they really like the recruiting circuit for Notre Dame. So I really am excited about where they are, and I'm excited to see kind of how it evolves moving forward for Notre Dame as well.
I think we could talk about need all day long, and it's obviously a need. You talk about the guys that they lose. I think the even bigger thing for me is they need to uptick the talent. and beyond just like, so what they've been doing lately. So like you look at the 2021 class, which I like. I look at the 2022 class. I look at Benjamin Norris and Ryan Barnes. Those are two guys I like a lot, just like I like Kerry G. But the problem is a lot of these guys are really low floor, high ceiling guys. Kerry G was that way. He was a guy that if he pans out, I thought he could have been a good player, but there was also a lot of, I don't know, he's going to pan out in it. Same thing with Ryan Barnes. I think if Ryan Barnes gets into his ceiling territory, he's going to be a really good football player at Notre Dame. But there's a ways to go before he gets to that point in time, which is why you see a lot of these guys not playing as freshmen, because they're not that ready-made, Derek Stingley, show up and be ready to play as a freshman kind of guy. And I feel like Notre Dame needs to continue to recruit players like that, but they're going to have to start landing a couple guys a year that are just like that. That dude's going to play the minute he steps foot on campus. I think it's a little too early for us to say that about Justyn Rhett, simply from a lack of availability of film. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. But size, measurables, and all that, it's there. Peyton Bowen is if you're on the roster the day he shows up, you better work kind of guy. And I would argue that Adon Shuler, with the jump he made from sophomore to junior year, if he makes a similar senior year jump, he's another dude's like, you better make sure you don't like just assume he's going to sit for a year before you push for your job. And I think to me that is what makes this class so far so good and so important. Is these are kids that are not going to help you 3-4 years down the road if they continue to progress, because again, they're all just juniors in high school. If they continue to progress the way that they have thus far, this is a group that adds athleticism, adds playmaking, and adds this group is going to be able to help you right away. It's a very strong foundation. And the second part of this too is, Ryan, and we'll get into this a little bit more down the road, but getting these three guys in early allows you to say, okay, now you can build on it. Having said that, I want to prepare you all for something. Okay, Ryan, you know where I'm going with this. Justyn Rhett's a top 50 ranked football player. Peyton Bowen is a top 50 ranked football player. The schools that want these kids are not going to stop recruiting them. Okay? These are big-time players from big-time areas. And when you recruit big-time players from big-time areas, guess what? They may take visits. They're, schools are going to still recruit them. That's the life of recruiting big boy football. So brace yourselves. And if you are someone who is going to panic every time one of these kids gets offered or takes a visit, you may want to take a step back from following recruiting this year, because with Keon Keeley, with Brendan, well, not Brendan Verman, I think I don't see him making visits, but with Keon and Peyton and Justyn Rhett and, guys like that, Cooper Flanagan, who was recently offered by Alabama, there's a chance some of these kids are going to get, recruited and take visits. So brace yourself for it. But I do think they're all firm in their commitment right now, as firm as you can be, in the modern era of recruiting. And so that's why we're going to talk about them, because if you look at them as a trio, this group adds some serious playmaking ability to the secondary.
Yeah. I mean, I think the common theme, Brian, is whether we're talking about defensive line, whether we're talking about linebackers, whether we're talking about the secondary, the key for the defense and the key for the staff is to get longer on all levels, right? And when you're talking specifically about, and this is, Adon Shuler is a very talented kid, and we'll get into that. But the length and the athleticism that both Rhett and Bowen have, they're going to be two of the freakier athletes of the secondary the minute they step on campus. So adding that type of length, that type of playmaking ability to the secondary, I think is paramount. And it's obviously what Marcus Freeman was so successful at Cincinnati was he had those guys, right? Like he had the Sauce Gardners, he had the Kobe Bryants, he had Brian Cook, he had all these guys, the James Wiggins that was there, that was, off injured. Like they had guys that could present matchups all over the secondary. And no matter where you put guys, you had length to counteract them, whether it's a tight end or a big slot or guy working outside the numbers. You had a guy that you could throw at those types of dudes. And that's what Notre Dame, I think, is building. They have different body types and long body types that will be able to counteract a lot of different alignments defensively, which is exciting.
You saw that all over the championship game. You see it all. When I watch the championship game, and I don't think all those guys at Georgia and Alabama are necessarily great players, but man, they're long. They're all long. And if you look at, Cam Hart, Cam Hart can make a mistake and get and overcome it, not because he's a 4.2, although Cam Hart's faster than people realize. He's incredibly long, right? And we saw
Mhm.
that with Kyle Hamilton. I'll be willing to bet Kyle Hamilton's not going to run a 4.3 to combine. At least I don't think he
Nah,
will. I mean, with him,
nah.
I never bet against him on anything, but it's just
Mhm.
the range, the length,
Right.
and those are the things that make him special. So clearly that's something that Marcus Freeman covets and
Mhm.
the secondary staff covets is length in the secondary.
Absolutely.
And this
Yep.
group has that. And we'll kind of get into it, Ryan. So let's first kind of dive into Justyn Rhett, who
Mhm.
is a guy that we're going to, full disclosure, okay, we're going to talk about what we know of Justyn Rhett, and we're going to share some things that we've learned from somebody, some folks that I know in the scouting, someone who can scout film, look at film with a very strong coaching background, who's seen a lot more of Justyn Rhett than we have. There's just not a lot
Mhm.
of film available. And so
Sure.
we're going to kind of go over a little bit of film that we have, give you our impression of what we see, but we're also relying on people that we know that are, and we're not talking about like somebody that works at this website. I'm talking about coaches and scouting, things like that have seen Justyn Rhett. And so we're going to have to rely a little bit on that for now until we get more film, right? And that's
Mhm.
the thing. So just understand that as we kind of dive into this conversation, there's just not a lot of a film on him, and I wonder if that's partly why you see this crazy rankings
Variance.
range.
Yeah.
Which again, we've talked about it last week. You're going to see more and more of this moving forward because as you have 4 different recruiting services, you have 4 different agendas, and
Mhm.
agendas drive rankings now. But right now, this is kind of, and to me, he is, in my opinion, of what I've seen of Justyn Rhett so far, the people I've talked to that have seen him, I would say he's closer to the top 2 than the bottom 2. I don't
Right.
know if I'm ready to put him in the top 50 category yet, just because I just don't have enough. But
Mhm.
what I do know, I can comfortably say for me, he's a top 100 football player, in my
Sure.
opinion.
Yep.
Just the measurables, the athletic traits, those things alone to me make him a top 100 guy. So
Yep.
you're going to see a lot of this. You're not going to see it with Peyton Bowen, but you're going to see this with a lot of guys. There's just these weird, just strange variances when it comes to these guys. So let's kind of talk about Justyn as a player and what we do know and what we can say based on what we've seen and what we've talked to.
Mhm.
Number one, Ryan, the first thing that stands out is this is a big kid. And this is a
Yes,
kid
it
with
is.
really good size. But I'll say this too: if you look at him in the face and you look at his body,
Mhm.
he's got a young body. And what I mean by that is you look at kids, and some of these kids that are like 16 years old and they look like they're grown men. That
Right.
guy's not going to get a whole lot bigger and stronger. He's kind of already hit that physical growth spurt. Justyn
Mhm.
looks young,
He
which
does.
means he's going to keep filling out. He's going to get stronger. You're going to see a jump. You're going to see a little bit of juice come out of him, before he gets to junior, senior year. You're going to see that jump and explosiveness a little bit. That's what you normally see from those kind of things. And it's one of the things you look for in the evaluation is like, does this kid look like he's got a body that's got a lot of room to grow? Or is this a kid that kind of looks like when he gets on campus, he's going to look a lot as a senior in college, he's going to look a lot like he does as a senior in high school. There are just
Right.
some kids like that. And to me, great size, strong for his age, but still has a lot of room for development in that frame, Ryan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's a part of, and I had a question in a mailbag, I think the first week I put it out, because someone asked me what was some similarities between scouting for the NFL draft and then trying to project how high schoolers will transition to college. And I think body typing is the same kind of conversation, right? Like you said, you can look at his frame and see the length everywhere, and you can also still see that there's a lot of room to grow. So I think most of the platforms have him listed about 6'1", 185 to 187 pounds, somewhere in that ballpark. This kid, I think, could comfortably carry 195, 200 pounds, and that's when he
I
reshapes
was
his
told
body.
he's already up to 200 right now.
Wow, is
Yeah.
he really?
Now
That's
it's
incredible.
winter, right? It's
Yeah,
winter, so that he's probably
might
got,
not be all good weight. Yeah.
no, and not just good weight, but like it's weight room weight, right? That's
Mhm.
that's where it is. It's like that's why guys tend to be way more in the spring than they do in the fall because you get
Sure.
that weight room weight, which is kind of part of the year evolution. It's like build up that strength, and then you work on endurance, then you work on explosiveness and that kind of thing. So I would imagine he'll
Sure.
be a little bit closer to 195-ish, but he's already kind
Mhm.
of put on some of that weight already. And he's with his trainers and things like that. So yes, you are correct, Ryan. He is already kind of tapping into that, which is why I'm really looking forward to seeing him this spring. And if I don't know if he's going to be in any camps or not, but, I'm hoping he comes to Notre Dame and works out this summer and those type of things, because I'm really looking forward to seeing him, see what kind of growth he's made as a player.
Yeah.
Kind of tying into that first point, the thing I like is it's one thing to be big, but if you're big for no reason, then it doesn't really matter how big you are. You've got to know how to use that size. And that's the thing you see about Justyn is he understands who he is as a player. Yeah. I'm 6 foot plus. I'm 190 plus. I have pretty good arm length. It's not elite arm length like Cam Hart arm length, but it's good. It's definitely at least above average in my opinion, if not, on the good side.
Yeah.
Which sometimes can be hard to tell with corners because they're always kind of got their arms tucked. You know what I mean? But it looks to have good arm length in some of the videos I've seen. But he knows how to use it. Fast hands, strong hands, and he wants to play a physical brand of cover football. And I think that's important too for a kid his size and also for the fit in the Notre Dame defense.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think one question that maybe people have is why is length so important? Because I know you mentioned range, right? Like you always talk about, the ability to cover ground. Like that's why length is important. But also the length for a cornerback specifically is at the line of scrimmage and at the catch point. Like those are two places where length is paramount. The ability to get inside on a chest and have a calculated punch and make sure that our feet are still connected while we make that punch, but that length that we have there to strike, to keep him, to kind of keep the wide receiver in his place away from you. And then when we're talking about down the field, whether it is something, a short in breaking route, or it's something, down the field on a vertical plane, the ability to, close that ground, to close that gap, to get that hand in the passing lane. Like that is paramount for the position. And that's why length matters so much, not only at the line of scrimmage, but also down the football field to be able to close that gap. Because some people can close that gap with just speed. Some people close that gap with length. Some people have both, kind of like Justyn Rhett has.
Right. I think if you want to know why length is important, I would say go watch Purdue's corners against Notre Dame. Go watch Cincinnati. Just watch anything that Ahmed Gardner does, right? And Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant's got some really good length too.
Yep.
Go look at what Oklahoma State did to Notre Dame. Just how they were able in that second half to use that length and that physicality in coverage, because it's that combination. You could be long, but if you don't use your length, if you're just long and you just kind of want to read and react and all that kind of stuff, there's some effectiveness to that. But I feel like if you watch Ahmed Gardner, Ryan, I don't think he's necessarily, you tell me if you've watched more than I have, so you correct me if I'm wrong.
A lot. Yep.
I don't think he's super powerful, right? Like he's not like that guy that's just going to like jam you up. Like, I remember talking to a receiver that played against Dre Bly, and he's like, man, you'd get after a game, your ribs, your forearms, like you're just bruised all over, because he was so powerful with his hands and so physical. Like Ahmed's not that, but he knows how to use where he becomes physical is once you transition and his hands get onto you, that's where his physicality takes over. And that's what we talk about. Being physical in coverage isn't like just necessarily coming up and just punching a guy at the line of scrimmage. That's going to only work so much. But if you try to do that all game against a Devontae Smith, a player, I'm trying to think like Jalen Waddle, a Garrett Wilson, they're going to beat you a few times. Yeah. And once you come with that force and you lose, strike up the band for the other team, right? Like there's got to be some control to that physicality. But if you're physical at the line, but then you're not physical once you transition, you're not going to be as dominant. What makes guys like Ahmed Gardner so good is the way that he uses his hands once he transitions. And to me, that's what separates the good corners from the elite corners. And Justyn has a lot of work to do from a technical standpoint because he's young, right? I mean, he's coached well for a junior in high school, but he's still a junior in high school. The potential is there for that to become a major strength of his game, which is something I think is very important when looking at projecting him to the next level.
Yeah, I think that especially a lot of younger corners, they get a little overzealous at the line of scrimmage. I forget who it was. There was a corner that came out a couple years ago that had like 33 or 34-inch arms coming into the NFL. And I mean, everyone's like, oh, look at that length, press man corner. Well, he was so preoccupied with the upper body movement, right? And he would end up lunging and his feet would get stuck in sand instead of activating it all together. It's all about calculated punch, right? Like that's where that length, you need to make sure that your feet are working with your upper body, or else you're going to kind of be in a bad situation. Like you're talking about, you mentioned a bunch of guys that have wide receiver speaking, that have great releases, right? Like they make guys miss at the line of scrimmage. And then once they do, they can't recover. And sometimes corners can have bad punches because they have that length and they can recover, but usually activating that length at the line of scrimmage is something where it's more calculated than it is, I'm just going to knock you out type of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Did it happen to be like either Greedy Williams or Jawan Williams? Those are the first two guys that were super long.
Jawan. Oh man, I dislike Jawan's film so much, man. He was one of those guys. He absolutely was. He was one of those guys that would just try to beat you up, but at some point it was like, Jawan, you need to take that back a little bit, man, because you're giving up a lot more than you should be giving up right now. Like, let's use it, right? So yeah, Jawan Williams definitely won. I don't really remember, man. I'm trying to remember what my thoughts about Greedy.
I thought Greedy
was
being overly aggressive at the line. Yeah, I don't remember. I'm just thinking of like tall, long corners. And that's partly what hurt Greedy against Miles Boykin in the what was it, the Camping World Bowl or was it Citrus Bowl?
I think it was Camping World, wasn't it? No, I could be wrong.
Citrus. When did they play in the Citrus? Yeah, it was Camping World Bowl in 2017, and there was a Music City Bowl in 2014 is when they played it. But yeah, he wasn't willing to be physical with Miles. And so Miles just stacked him up and beat him, just ran past him because Miles is a lot faster than people realize. But I think the third thing, obviously, we talk about high football IQ. He has plus route recognition to me, which the thing about Justyn you have to understand is he didn't really play his sophomore season.
Right.
Nevada's one of the states that canceled football. There was like a little bit of like a spring 7-on-7-ish and like a couple spring games, I believe, but like he missed a whole year of development, of in-game development. And so that puts him behind a little bit the 8 ball too. And even despite that lack of just reps, you look at it and say, man, boy, this kid's got the mind for the position. Like this kid's smart. This kid, you can tell he watches film. You can tell he studies the game. You can see him because it's not just knowing like, okay, hey, I see this in cuts coming, but then being able to plant and beat that guy to a spot, right? So it's the instincts of seeing the route, but then knowing the angle to attack. You see some of that on film. And that to me, the way he plays the ball, and we'll get to some of this. You even saw it, like there's some practice film from his spring of his sophomore year. It was Citrus in 2017. It was Camping World was 2019 against Iowa State.
Was just
it's the same stadium, which is where I got confused because it's the same stadium, but it's just a different name. But you'll see him like he'll be playing like there's one clip that we'll get to where he's playing cover 2, and he just reads the quarterback eyes and just jumps underneath the corner route and just picks it off. He's got a really smart mind for the game. And the thing that impressed Notre Dame people is you can see it a little bit on film. But when he showed up to camp this summer, Notre Dame didn't have any film on him because he didn't play as a sophomore. They just knew he had size and went to a great program and great grades, comes from a good family. I mean, you knew all that stuff, so you knew he was a Notre Dame kid in that regards, but what kind of player is he? And Justyn hadn't really taken off as a prospect yet because nobody'd seen him yet. And he ran 2 back-to-back 4.4s for Notre Dame at that size.
So it was like 4.47, 4.45, right? Like
Like his slowest was a 4.48. I think he ran 2 of them. And the other one was better than that. And so, like, okay, 6 foot plus. At the time, he was like 185 plus and a 4.4 kid. And that's kind of that was like, okay, yeah, box check. When you're that long and you have that kind of long, because here's why. Well, I'm gonna explain, Ryan. Why is it important to have? Why is 40 time important for a corner? Because again, 40 time is as much about the long speed as the initial quickness, right? Why is that important for a corner, especially a corner that's going to play as much man as Notre Dame is going to ask their corners to play? Explain why that's an important trait.
Well, I mentioned it a little bit, right? Like sometimes things isn't always going to be perfect at the line of scrimmage, but when you're opening up and you're getting into a trail position, right? To be able to close that ground, because you always see, like, I think most people think of like, hey, guys running a fade, right? He's going to get an outside release and he's going to go down, but the ability to transition, flip your hips, and then get out of the blocks, quote unquote, right? And then be able to run and open up, that speed really shines kind of working down, just straight down the field. So
that opening up and just running vertically only happens when you're playing against Notre Dame's receivers.
Well, okay. Well,
most receivers, I'm having some fun.
I know.
What'll happen is like, so if I'm a receivers coach and Ryan, if I'm a receiver and Ryan's a DB and I'm trying to get an outside release and an outside vertical route, one of 2 things is going to happen. One of 3 things. He's either going to be head up on me, outside of me, or inside of me. Right. And so as a receiver, depending on how he's lined up is how I'm going to attack him. So if he's lined up inside of me, I'm going to do some lean outside and then try to stick him inside to get him thinking I'm inside. Because what you teach a receiver is if he's inside of you, there's a reason he's inside of you. You want to threaten his leverage, because if you threaten his leverage, usually corners are going to kind of overreact more because they're protecting against the inside move with their leverage. You want to threaten that, because that's when they kind of get on their heels, and then bam, you get on top of them. You kind of pull away outside, then you stack them, and then you've got them beat. You need that long speed to kind of be able to open. You got that plant. If you don't handle it right, you need to be able to open and run with that guy. If a guy's playing head up on me, I'm going to try to make some kind of move, see which way he's leaning, and then try to make a move off of him. If he's outside of me, I'm going to press him outside, get him to widen, and then slip inside of him and be able to stack him on top in that direction, right? Well, as a corner, you need to be able to recover, but then in that position, you need to be able to recover and kind of get back inside, and because if you're playing a big corner and he's 6'4" and you're outside of him, that ball's getting caught, right? And so you've got to get back in phase proper phase with him. If you're a 4'6" guy and you don't have, or if you're a guy that doesn't have good long speed, once you get out of phase, you're out of phase. You're just beat against good corners. And that's why that 4'4" is important for Justyn, because he's going to be allowed to overcome mistakes. It also gives Notre Dame, if a guy's a 4'4" as a corner's coach or a D coordinator, I'm going to be more willing to say, hey, let's be aggressive with him, because he can recover if he gets beat, right? So it's going to allow you to be more aggressive, where if a guy doesn't have recovery speed, a perfect example, watch Clarence Lewis in the bowl game. Once they stacked him, he was done. He couldn't recover. He doesn't have the speed to recover, right? Cam Hart does, right? Troy Pride did. So I think that's an important piece to this with him as well. Now, this last piece is his film is really inconsistent when it comes to, in my opinion, Ryan, showing agility and transition ability. It's really inconsistent. Some snaps he looks to have it, some snaps he doesn't. And I think part of it is just sometimes as a young player, your footwork's not always going to be as precise as a junior in high school as it will be when you're a junior in college, right? And if your feet aren't right, you're going to look like you are tight. Then there's clips where he's tight. So I asked some people that have seen him on game film, they've seen him in person, and they said his feet and his transitions are really clean. That was the word that was given to me, really clean. And that's a big compliment for a corner, right? You want that, right? That's a good thing to be clean. It means there's no tightness, because what you don't want to do is there's a heavy-footed guy playing corner. What that means is when you plant, that foot gets stuck in the ground a little bit. And it takes a while for you to get out of that and into your transition, whether it's to be planting downhill, whether it's to be working laterally. You want guys that are planting, getting out quick, right? And that's what Ryan shows it, or Justyn shows at times. Ryan may show it on film. I haven't seen Ryan's film. I haven't been able to evaluate that. But
I was a downhill linebacker. I wasn't changing direction too much.
Okay. But when you see a corner like Justyn that has, if he can play that way, man, 6 foot plus, 190 plus, 4.4 speed, strong IQ, and have clean transitions. That's why some people look at him and say top 50 football player, because that's really the total package in a corner. I mean, and that's really what you're looking for.
Yeah, no, top 50 talent for sure. Obviously, we're waiting to just kind of see the full scope of what he can be, right? The full film to just validate that, because I honestly thought, and I know we'll talk about it more. I agree with you. I think that his change of direction, his short area quickness, I thought was plus for his size. I do think that there's some times where we'll talk about, I think that his feet get a little outside of his frame a little bit, right? Where they gets a little bit wide. That's going to affect the transitions. And we'll get into that, because I'm sure that we're going to see a couple clips where it's a little bit in there. But for his size, I think that gives you so much possibility, because we talked about activating the length at the line of scrimmage, activating the length down the football field. And then if he has short area explosiveness, then we're talking about ability to play a bunch of different multiple of coverages now.
The reason it's important to note what we just said is because if you see clips of a guy looking tight or looking slow-footed, that's obviously going to make you think he's tight or slow-footed. But then if maybe half of his clips show foot quickness and smooth hip tightness, transition ability, smooth. I mean, there's all types of different expressions people use. Basically, the ability to open and run clean, smooth football, right? I've taught Ryan and I were joking about this. Here's what it's going to look like, right? So I'm at the Notre Dame Pro Day in 2019. So it was like right after the 2018 season. And they're doing a back pedal drill. So what you do is you put a guy on the line, on the sideline, and you like the 25-yard line going across. And you have him back pedal, and then you have him change direction, right? And you point, he's got to change direction. If a guy's got loose hips, he's going to stay right on that line and flip, stay around that line. So while I'm watching Drew Tranquil do that, and Ryan, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. It's like, I mean, he's right on that line. He's just flipping his hips and right on that line. And then Tavon Coney does it, and he turns it into a zigzag drill, right? Because he's so tight in the hips that when he turns, it's slow, but it takes his whole body with him. That's a guy with tight hips, right? So now if Drew Tranquil's footwork wasn't good, he would have been zigzagging too, but he had the athletic talent. So that's what we say is if you can see a kid do it 4 or 5 times, he has the potential to do it. A guy doesn't have tight hips on one play and then loose hips on the next one. He either has one or the other, right? And if he's got loose hips, sometimes he has loose hips. It's usually a technical thing. That's the problem. And that's where you got to start looking into what's his technique like, what's his footwork like, right? You know, some guys lean back too much, some guys lean up too much, some guys get too wide of a base, some guys get too long in their pedal, some guys can get a little too choppy in their pedal. It's all types of different things you can look at, which is why Nick Saban doesn't teach back pedal. Nick Saban just says, okay, I don't like back pedal. It's not a natural thing. We're not going to back pedal, right? Which
makes sense.
Makes a ton of sense to me. I mean, it really makes a ton. You don't have to transition if you're playing at Bama. You know what I mean? So, so let's dive into some film, Ryan, and we'll show people that. And the first film that we're going to see it's not super clear. So just bear with us a little bit on that. But it's huddle film, so we're going to get a chance to see it. But you're going to see him. He plays at Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas. So this field is going to look very familiar to all of you. So let's dive into Justyn's film. This is a play where, again, you see his footwork a little bit out of place, but that is a really clean transition, Ryan.
Smooth. Yeah, it's smooth. It's really smooth because you can see he has inside leverage to start. The wide receiver has a slight head fake outside, takes an outside release, and then because he's trying to run an inside slant, right? Like he wants Justyn to open up towards the sideline. But do you see when he turns his chest a little towards the sideline, just a quick twitch there to get back into phase that's fantastic for a longer guy.
If you're a corners coach, you don't care that his technique got him in trouble. You don't, because that's why you get paid 6 figures, right?
Exactly.
To coach that. What you care about is that right there. Can he flip his hips with ease? Yes, he can. And watch how quick his feet are in that transition, like just real smooth. This one I'm talking about, watch his right foot. When his right foot gets on the ground, right, it doesn't really like plant. You know, he's off of it and driving. And that's with him having too wide of a base there. His right foot is way outside of where it should be, but he's still able to quickly get off that thing. And that's what you want to see. And then you see the recovery speed from him as well. But you're definitely going to notice the size. This kid brings a lot of size to the table.
For sure.
He's a physical player. I love the physicality. Does a nice job here of not reaching with his right arm. I like that. That's a bad. I mean, you see that in the NFL still. Guys are playing this way when they go to reach with that inside arm. The natural habit is to use your outside arm, which in this case would be his right arm, to kind of grab hold. And does a nice job of not doing that and just getting to the ball with his inside arm.
And guys panic there too, right? If you're not a good athlete right there, you're going to panic. You're going to start grabbing. You could just see that he's comfortable staying in the hip pocket right there and able to get the pass break up. You can see the comfortability in that.
Look at that block destruction. I love this. That's that strong hands. That's a big boy. That's a tight end coming at him. If you watch, it's a big kid. And he just with ease. And look how quickly he gets off of that block and gets to the ball carry. Bam. Love it. I mean, that's
awesome.
That is, and that's coach tape right there. That's teaching tape right there that you're putting on. Like, okay, that one's going in our drills next year.
Some people don't care, but no quicker way to my heart than a cornerback tackling.
That tells me something about his attitude, Ryan. That's more the thing for me. It's like, okay, especially in high school kids, You know,
Yep.
like, are you a guy that's I'm out here to cover people? No, this kid's out here to win football games. Love this play right here. And then comes up, goes low. That's the last thing. He is a good, sound form tackler.
Absolutely. Yep.
He goes low. He goes for the legs. I love it. He just rides this poor kid into the bleachers.
You can tell he's really coached, and obviously we talked about Bishop Gorman being a good program. You could see it there. Although he missed, I mean, he basically missed. And this is for if there's any teachers out there, he basically had a gap year, with the sophomore season.
Yeah.
So he's literally a year behind from a playing perspective, right? But you could see just the comfortability again. I think when you see guys at the cornerback position that don't seem to rush anything, they let it come to them. They trust their ability. It's God given.
That's a confidence in himself. You're absolutely right. So again, this part, like, yes, he's well coached, but he's still a junior in high school. And I mean, you see what I don't like here with this technique, he's got too wide of a base. He's flat-footed, right? So he's going to have a weight transfer at the snap before he can do anything. That I can coach that out of him in a spring. You know what I mean? Like if I'm a corners coach. That's just that young guy thing that his body's still learning that. He's still doing the muscle memory aspects of that. So, well coached for his age, and he's only going to get better. You don't want a guy that is a ready-made product as a junior in high school. Trust me on that.
No, we don't get maxed out when we're juniors. Yeah. We don't want that.
I love this compete here. He's got to be more – if you're going to punch your hands, you've got to be more forceful with your hands, in my opinion. But I love the compete level there. That's one of those ones where you can kind of see good length there. You see how his hands drop. You see good length there. That guy never gets into his chest. That's another positive. A lot to improve there technically, but I love the compete level.
All right, a little bit of off coverage here. Working downhill.
So what I love about this is one of my favorite reps of Justyn Rhett. Okay, let me explain why. There's two things on this. Okay. Number one, he's reading slant at first. Okay, because the receiver's running a route. And you see him right here, he sees slant, and he is trying to beat that guy to his upfield shoulder. Upfield shoulder means he's trying to beat that guy inside. That's how you play a slant. If you get behind on a slant route in off coverage, you're beat. The only way you can play a slant from behind is if you're in press, because then you can be in front of it, right? But if you're in off coverage and the slant's being run in front of you, you've got to beat him to the spot, okay? And that's what he's doing here. But watch how quickly he recognizes run and then gets back outside. Because here's the thing, if he doesn't recognize run here, and he beats that corner inside, that makes him very blockable, and there's nobody outside if that running back gets through the first line. There's nobody outside of him.
And some guys will also just get overzealous, right? They want to get involved in the play, and then they'll cut inside of that block as well. So you're not maintaining that contain. Absolutely.
That is when I talk about high football IQ, that right there is a perfect example. Reads pass, sees run, and quickly gets outside and makes that play. This is one of them, and it's not like oh man, look at that great play, like a typical highlight reel play. But for me as a football coach, that tells me this kid has a mind for the game. I love that.
And he's competitive. He wants to get in on the play as well. So
here's the bottom of the screen. Again, this is another thing where his footwork gets him in a little bit of trouble initially. Just like you said, Ryan, explain it again. This is a perfect example of what you're talking about earlier about his getting outside of his base.
Yeah, it's natural, right? Like our power position, everything we do, whether we're squatting, whether we're power cleaning, whatever we're doing, we want to keep that base, which is about shoulder width apart. And we're talking about that when we start getting further and further outside of that, especially at a cornerback position or a position that you need change of direction, you're just slower, right? Like you're at a position where your levers are so far outside your frame that it's just going to take an added extra step to get out of to change direction there. You're not in a power position to change direction. So when he's outside of his frame like that, everything just gets a little clunkier when you're transitioning.
Now, why is this on a highlight tape? Because you see him recover and get hands on downfield. Yeah, that's that understand that toughness, right? And then takes the guy right out of bounds. And
He
this is
almost
a
takes
pass
the
play too. I mean,
Yep.
they're trying to
Yep.
throw deep, and he just takes this guy out of bounds.
Yep. He almost knocked over the Gatorade cooler.
Yeah, like if I'm a receivers coach, that kid's not playing another snap for me that game. Right? I mean, you just got your like soul taken from you as a receiver. Like there's nothing worse that can happen to you than that.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. Nice pedal. It gets, again, feet get a little bit outside of, but you can see the clean transitions, the just getting downhill quickly.
And look at the patience, right? Like they're in a trips formation. They're in a bunch there. They're trying to make defensive backs guess wrong, basically, right? They're trying to capitalize off a miscommunication, and he's just able to stay patient and then come downhill and make a solid tackle.
And by going low, he's able to help kind of eliminate the stiff arm. And this also is another example of why length is important.
For sure.
If he's got little stubby 31-inch arms, he's getting stiff-armed here.
Yep.
And he's not making that tackle, but he's got that length where even though that guy this is a decent stiff arm by this kid, gets it right on the helmet. He's able to get his hands out and make the tackle.
Yep.
This is where you see that length.
Yeah, like we talked about Drake Bowen a little bit, and I don't think we last week on the recruiting show, and I don't think we really mentioned like tackle radius as much because Drake's not the longest guy in the world, right? But that's kind of where it comes in handy here. You're playing outside of your frame in the run game. You're able to close ground and able to make tackles outside of your frame. Like you don't have to be in close quarters necessarily to make the tackle.
Mm-hmm.
I like this little thump at the end.
I like the toughness there.
Yep. You see the snap through the hips too. Like you see their power there.
I feel bad for these I don't know who this school is, but these receivers are getting just manhandled.
They sure are.
I mean, like you got to be a little careful with that. You don't want to what this clip shows me is this shows me toughness and strength. This isn't necessarily what I want to be doing in college a ton, because if that guy's a good receiver, once you lunge at him like that, he's slipping inside of you and beating you. You know what I mean? But it shows me toughness. It shows me the desire to be physicality. As that gets refined and he's going against better receivers, this is what we talk about. Like you don't know what you don't know till you realize you don't know it. You talk about like Deion Colsey. Like you can get away with this because you're just so talented and better than that guy. Then you get to college and Tobias Merriweather, stems you out. You lunge and then he flips inside of you and then smokes you. You're like, oh, okay. All right, I got to do better next time, and that makes you better. Makes you a better player when you get tested like that. But I love the toughness, just taking people's souls on defense against that poor team.
All right, again, he's in off diagnosing. So he's flipping his hips towards the middle of the field, which tells you that he's in zone coverage. Right, it's a zone turn. Comes downhill, block destruction, takes him to the sideline.
You see the length again, right? I mean, he's keeping that kid off his body. This kid competes, Ryan. That's why this kid really battles. You see his feet kind of get a little bit away from him, and some of this stuff is this clip right here is a sophomore clip. So these number 18 clips, like this one here, this is sophomore film mixed in with junior film. This number 2 is a junior. This is junior film right here.
It's funny if you look at his stats too. It just seems like teams just weren't throwing at him much, which makes sense.
Nope. Yep. He's got another DB. I mean, the safety on that team went to USC. He's a 5-star recruit. Now this is one of those ones where this is a rough transition, but if you watch it, it's a footwork thing. His feet, his footwork here in the transition keeps him from opening his hips, and it looks slow. But you can identify why that is. But you see you see him playing the ball and looks back to the ball, doesn't lose the receiver, right? That's something I like to see. Do you lose the receiver when you look back for back to the quarterback, and he doesn't here? That was also sophomore film. So let's get Go ahead,
I was
Ryan.
just going to say, and you're just looking at ball skills there, right? The
Mhm.
ability to play the ball in the air. Like you said, the pedal wasn't great. His feet got very close during that transition. His pad level got a little popped up a little bit when he's flipping, but just the ball skills. And then again, like you can just see the natural tools just pop off the screen with the kid.
I got to address something. I'm sorry. I'm going to lose
Yep.
my mind here. So, David Solomon, number one, can we chill out with the tight end talk? We're talking recruiting here. But a couple things real quick. Just because someone coached with someone doesn't mean it's a BK hire. Because let me remind you, Mike Elston was a BK hire, someone that been with Brian Kelly for a long time that he brought here with him. Did a pretty good job. Okay. So that doesn't mean it. This is a good hire. This is someone who was an offensive coordinator in the Big 12 last year that's now just going to be your tight ends coach, okay? In regards to this one, okay, it says the number one tight end coach and recruit in the country, Tim Brewster. First of all, Tim Brewster is not the best tight ends coach in the country. He is considered the best tight end recruiter in the country. But the things that make Tim Brewster a good recruiter, you can't do at Notre Dame. And I'm going to leave it at that. So with all due respect, I would never, ever – I wouldn't even return a phone call if I was Marcus Freeman and Tim Brewster called me because I'd be afraid that phone call would somehow get me on probation. Okay, so not happening. Okay, this is a guy that has coached receivers in the ACC, in the Big Ten. He's coached tight ends in the Big Ten, and he's a guy that Marcus Freeman has seen firsthand that can coach and recruit. Okay, not everybody. Just because you worked with someone doesn't make that a disqualifying attribute. Okay. So I just keep seeing this and it's kind of plucking my last nerve. And it's like, but now that we've discussed this, okay, can we get back to talking corner recruiting, which is the topic of the show tonight, not corners coach. So our tight ends coach. I want to bring up, this is Ryan, some film of last spring. And this is just some practice film. And there's some really good clips in here of him just moving, some good movement stuff here, which is why I wanted to pull this one up. All right. And David, I love you, man. I'm not, I've had to answer this question like 15 times today about Tim Brewster. So it's not you that I'm frustrated by. It's just, you get asked that question so many times and it's like, okay, I get that y'all don't know Tim Brewster like I do, but no. There's a reason Tim Brewster is currently unemployed also, by the way. And a lot of tight end coaches have been hired, and he isn't one of them. Okay, so let's get to this. This is technically from the spring of his sophomore year. And these clips, Ryan, without pads and stuff, you can really see the length in some of these clips.
Yep.
Like look how like his upper arm, you can see how low it hangs down. That's a good sign. Now again, the press technique, not good. But the length, good. But that'll come. What I love is the compete level there. There he's playing field corner.
And off coverage.
Zone. This is the play I was talking about, right? Like he's in zone. He doesn't bite down too hard, but he's got to let that quarterback know I'm taking the hitch, right? Because that's his responsibility. In cover 2, his responsibility is the flat if the flat is threatened. Okay.
Right.
Now, so if this hitch gets thrown, you're banging it. But what he does is he steps to the hitch, which is responsibility, but he's got his eyes on the quarterback. A good zone defender knows that you can't just read the route. You have to read the route through to the quarterback. Okay. That's what makes a good zone defender. You can see he does that here. He's playing the hitch, but he's got his eyes inside. He reads the quarterback, and the quarterback is just staring down this corner route, and Justyn sees it and opens up and goes and picks it off.
Yep. Just trying to high-low him. You're trying to make it so he splits the difference. The good thing with a kid like this is that he's such a good athlete that he could probably even cheat a little bit more to the corner and still come back towards the football. Like that's where the God-given ability comes in, but also he was coached well to split the difference there in cover 2.
Yep. Really smooth transition here. I really this is one of my favorite clips on this one, Ryan. You just see him like kind of turn and get downhill, just really smooth and clean We talk about clean transition. This is one of those examples, in my opinion.
Because that's not an easy turn right there. Like that's an athletic move right there.
Right. And this is him as a sophomore in high school.
Yep. Because you're opening up vertically, right? Like you're running and then you're completely flipping your hips to the sideline and coming down on a 45-degree angle. Like that is not an easy turn at all.
much lighter feet here than we see some of the film. You see this here. I like that. Be light on your feet. Don't plant your feet like we were seeing on some of the other things. I like the compete level. This is one of those ones where you can see the length a lot better than on some of that game film. Let's see him down here. Look how long his arms are. This is a clip where you can kind of see that, Ryan.
You're hanging. Yep, they're hanging down there.
Good zone defender. I love this. Keeps his depth, but doesn't just pedal out of there, right? And now he's in position to play that route. If he's just pedaling, you know, then and just that guy's gonna, you know, he's not gonna be in position to jump this guy.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, Ryan, here we go. My man Toe Jam. Clean, smooth transition like BK's transition to LSU.
That's awesome.
Well done, Toe Jam.
Like his dance moves, actually.
Yeah. Love this. All right, this is you got a post wheel concept, right? Actually, dig wheel. Okay, he's got his eyes inside. He knows his responsibility. Sees that. So what's happening here is as soon as that receiver breaks inside, he's got to get his eyes inside to see if he's being threatened outside. Okay, if he's not being threatened outside, then he's going to continue to squeeze inside on that in cut, right? But he gets his eyes inside and sees the wheel and stays on top of it. This is when I talk about that high football IQ, Ryan, perfect example. And you've talked about being in phase, right?
Yep.
That means different things, but you want to stay on top of this wheel route. You absolutely want to stay on top of it. He does it, and bam, that's just textbook for a young kid. I mean, that is really good stuff.
Speaking as a former high school coach, there is no bigger frustration than watching kids sometimes when they're playing cover 3 and you're running some type of, like we just saw a dig wheel, but like if it's a post wheel or something like that, and they always seem to get sucked in on that post, man. Like they just are running right down the middle of the field, and you're like, that wheel's wide open for a touchdown to the sideline. Thank you very much, though. So I very much love the fact that we're talking about a kid that has good zone awareness. I love
as
that.
a sophomore in high school.
Yes.
So you love to see it. You love to see it. All right. Our next player in the topic of conversation is Peyton Bowen. He is a safety from Denton Geyer High School in Texas. Ryan, this is a big-time football player. This was a huge commitment from Notre Dame. And people say, why would you take a kid's commitment if you know he's going to take visits? Number one, Notre Dame didn't know he was going to take a visit, right? And they've said, hey, we don't mind if you want to take visits. Just let us know, right? I believe it was Tom Loy reported that, and we're trying to get confirmation of that. But that's kind of what you do. But I would rather him be taking visits as our commit if you're a Notre Dame coach than as not, because now you kind of always have that. We've got that place with him where we're always going to get last crack at it. Sure. You know, and that's exactly why you do it, because if that's what it takes to get a kid like Peyton Bowen, then that's what there are other safeties are like, hey coach, I want to commit but still visits. You're like, that's fine. Just take visits. You don't worry about committing right now. If Peyton Bowen wants to commit and take visits, if Keon Keeley wants to commit and take visits, you're like, okay, you know, because you'd much rather be the school he's committed to. I'd rather him be my commit and when he visits Alabama than visit Alabama as an uncommitted player.
For sure.
Right? Same thing with Peyton Bowen going to Oklahoma. So Peyton Bowen, big time player, big time recruit. This was a big one for Notre Dame, Ryan. This is one of those ones you look at and say, this is the kind of big gap closing type of player that you need to get at safety, and the rankings reflect that. I actually would argue that these are a little low. I think he's a borderline top 25 to 35 type of player for me. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I was going to say 20 to 40, like somewhere in that ballpark for me as well. I think that it's nice, though, to see that there's not quite as much variance here. So people obviously are seeing similar things, right? Like it's not like we saw with Rhett. It was like somebody was in the 50s and somebody was in the 250s. You're a top 100
recruit. You're considered a really good football player.
Exactly. And we'll see. I mean, Rhett a lot. I mean, so Rhett's got awesome traits, right? Bowen, there's some special movement skills here,
and more on field. There's just more film available of him
for sure,
and that's the thing that I love about it. And he's another guy that Notre Dame loved him. Right. He was definitely in that conversation of who's your favorite safety. Then he came to camp and lines up and he runs a 4.41. I think I've told the story before. Notre Dame coaches are like,
Yep.
they're looking like, no, that's not right. Like, no, because they thought he was fast, but 4.41's for a high school junior's blazing.
Yes.
So they had him run it again. And they all are
Mhm.
sitting there like, okay, let's all get our clocks right. 4.38 on the next one. Right? 6'1", 185. This kid's a big time player. And you can see it from the recruiting rankings, consensus top, well within consensus top 100 player. And I would imagine if he was uncommitted right now and taking visits, you'd
Mhm.
see him kind of go up a little bit in some of these rankings, but that's just the reality of it. Strengths for Peyton Bowen. Number one, elite size speed combination.
Yep.
I mean, elite. Now, elite safety size is not, are you Kyle Hamilton? Kyle Hamilton is a unicorn. Okay. It's more of if you're plus 6 foot and you have long arms, that's plus length for a safety. There's a lot of 5'11" safeties in the National Football League.
There's been like 4 guys historically that are Kyle Hamilton. It's like Kyle Hamilton, Steve Atwater, Sean Taylor, Kenny Easley. Like that's all that's ever been Kyle Hamilton. So he is an outlier of all outliers.
Right. This kid, 6 foot plus, was listed around 6'1", 6 foot plus, 185 plus, long arms, and like we said, really tremendous speed. Now, on film, you'll see his speed show up even more in the kick game and on offense. But there's just not a ton of opportunities for him to show that long speed on defense. You'll see some of it, but you really see it as a kick returner. And he plays against good football. I mean, he plays against some really good football. I mean, he's going against almost guys every week that are at the very least FCS players. Absolutely. And he is a very talented player. And with that comes great range. And the thing I like about it is some guys have great range going downhill. Some guys have great range playing center field. I think Peyton has great range playing both. And I don't use the word great loosely, right? It is meant like for his age and where he's at his development, that is really, really good, right? Downhill and vertical range. Yeah, he's smooth and explosive, Ryan. And for a safety, man, that is a must get. You have to be an elite safety. You have to have both of those things, in my opinion.
For sure. And there's going to be some clips that we show where he's in the screen, right? And then the ball is going to be up in the air. And then you are just going to be mesmerized almost with how much ground he covers from being in screen to being out of screen. Like and it gives you so much ability on the back end. Because if you have a kid like this for Notre Dame, that can play single high to allow you to play some man coverage underneath, that it erases so many mistakes potentially, and it gives you so many different possibilities. But then, hey, coming downhill, he can also work inside out and run the alley, and he can cover ground in a hurry. So that range gives you so many possibilities in coverage. Like you don't have to just play too high all the time because you don't trust a guy to play the middle of the field and play middle of the field to hash or to the sideline. Like this kid has that type of range where he can make up for mistakes, but then also give the players in front of him a big boost in the ability to be versatile in the second and the first level, honestly, too, with this type of kid.
Next thing, you're going to see this a lot with Notre Dame recruits on defense, and it is intentional. And that is football IQ, strong feel for the game, instinctive. Notre Dame you're going to take a chance on a kid who's an elite athlete if he's not super instinctive, because you hope that eventually comes, right? But if you can find kids with both, and that's part of what makes Kyle Hamilton so special. He's not just a freaky athlete or long. He's also a really smart football player. And that is what, that's what made Alohi Gilman so good. Is Alohi wasn't, he ran a 4.6 at the combine. He wasn't a 4.4 guy. He wasn't big, but he was a brilliant football player.
Instinctive.
And yes. And so you want that. Now, when you can find a guy that has that and the elite traits, that's what makes you an elite player. And to me, Peyton Bowen has a very strong feel for the game, which then leads into point 5, which is it allows him to make a lot of plays on offense and defense. And he doesn't get tested a whole lot on defense, but when he does, bad things tend to happen for you as an offense. There's no question about it.
He forces turnovers, and then you're going to see, I think there's one clip of him, as a receiver. There's clips of him as a kick returner. Like you'll see, man, when he has the ball in his hands, when he can make a play on the football, the playmaking ability is easy to see,
Yeah,
obviously.
his film is fun to watch, and let's get right to it.
Mhm.
And I love that the first clip is in Cowboy Stadium.
I know.
I love that. All right, let's get to some Peyton Bowen film. This is the first couple, I believe, are kick returns.
Yep.
So this is going to be him showing his speed and big time playmaking ability. And you can just right here, you see the length. Look at that. Look at that crease. That balance when he lands.
And like you said too, Brian, I don't think you can undersell the fact that he plays on a very successful program against a lot of great football players, and he is the kick returner, he's the punt returner, he plays on some offense. That with how much they ask him to do, I think that speaks paramount for what type of athlete he is.
This is a playoff game, folks.
Yep.
Right? Like, isn't this a playoff game? This isn't like, I don't think they're playing in, home of the Dallas Cowboys in a regular season game. I don't think. And I think
You wouldn't think so.
This is their indoor facility, right?
Yeah, looks like it. Yep.
Yeah. So I don't think this is a regular season game. I could be mistaken, but just look at that speed, that burst to hit that hole, and that is big time. And he's patient with it. Like that. Watch, he's kind of, where's the hole? Where's the hole? Where's the hole? And then right there, he turns on the jets. It's like, okay, that's pretty fast.
Yep, that angle is not going to work.
Nope. You better be as fast as he is and have an angle. This is at Baylor. This is the thing I love about watching this film too is like, okay, this kid's not playing at like Podunk High School in front of 2,000 people. Like this kid's playing on NFL Stadium. It was where the playoff games were, and then this is at Baylor. So he just so smooth. That's the other thing too, Ryan, is his speed can be sort of misleading because he's real fluid. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the guys that have a little bit of length sometimes, maybe they're a little high cut, have longer legs. You kind of, you're like, are they moving fast? But then you just see that everything, like he's a smooth runner who just understands the mechanics of running.
This is not good technique, right? Like at all.
No.
But you can see how quick his feet are here though, right? Like you don't want to be leaning back. You don't want to be standing straight up, but just look how smooth his feet are here in this transition. This is really impressive.
I think that was one of the first things I think we talked about, Brian, like I think a while ago now. And I was like, man, like his pedal is just like so high, but then you just see him, the ground he covers despite it. It's just insane.
Yep. And then once he gets his ball in his hands, it's like, uh-oh.
Yep.
Uh-oh.
House call.
Yep. He's a big time. This is him, a receiver.
Nice little hitch. Yep.
Nice catch.
Yeah.
Catches the ball kind of like a DB, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the greatest hands all the time, but that's kind of why he's more of a DB. But again, playmaker. Kid's just a football player, man.
Nice little hesitation there. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Is that against Allen? Is this Allen he's going against right here? This looks like Allen. Oh boy, that means he's going to get some dudes. Some of these high school football fields in Texas are just absurd. It's like,
it really is.
Is that a D1 stadium? No, that's a high school stadium.
It's crazy.
This is him on offense. See the ball skills. This guy could ball skills. He just doesn't have
great hands.
Yeah. Good hands, just not, not great. Look at him find that hole. He's about to cut it back, and then he's like, oh, wait a minute. No, I see that. Oh, there we go. Let me crease that sucker. Yep. And then, just this kid's a football player. This kid's really good.
And he can help you on special teams, which is always nice.
Yeah,
especially early.
Yeah. Adds a little something to the table. That's for as bad as his technique is here, that's a really clean transition.
Smooth, yeah. Which tells you with that type of length and the smoothness that he has, as he improves his technique, he could probably do some stuff in man-to-man coverage, right? Coming down a little bit.
And I love the patience here too. He's the deep safety. This is not his guy. There's a guy inside of him that's taking that in cut. He's got to protect against. So here's why the patience is important. You say, well, the guy's clearly going inside. Well, maybe. But in college, you start playing some of these pro-style teams, they're going to send that guy on an in cut. And as soon as you plant, he's cutting back outside and getting width and going vertical, right? That's what's going to happen. So you want to be deep. You want to be patient. But he's got his eyes on. He wants to jump this route so bad. But then he's like, wait, no, it's cover two. I'm the deep guy. And then he makes the play. and it puts him in a position to make a play. I mean, that patience, that do your job, is something that allowed him to go out and make that play right there.
Yep. And he takes it to the house again for good measure.
Mm-hmm. Just look how easily he bends back downhill. He's widening out, then he gets back downhill. Very fluid, very clean player, and rangy. Talk about range. This is what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Just makes it look so easy.
Mm-hmm. It really does. Like, this is not good technique, right? No. This is not. This is grabby. He stops his feet. You don't ever want to stop your feet when you're a DB when a guy's getting to the top end of his route. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't matter because he's so fast. He's still able to recover and make the interception. Like, he has no business. This should be a touchdown for the other team. Yeah. That technique right there, this should be a touchdown for the other team. Let's be honest about that.
No, absolutely. And as obviously the talent gap, gets a little closer at the college level, this is stuff that you want to clean up because there will be some guys that will score touchdowns in this regard. But you see the range. The range is just crazy because I remember seeing that play and I'm just like, he looks like he's playing catch technique and press, and it doesn't make any sense. But then you see him flip his hips and you're like, oh, well, he has a high margin for error.
Yep. Oh, there's that 4.3 speed. Okay, Here we go. The ball in your outside arm. Come on, defensive guy. He's hard to bring down because he's got great balance. The ability to like make this cut and then hit the ground and then get back to running right there. I mean, that's balance, right? I mean, that's
and
really
again,
impressive.
Good school on a high level. Not every player is playing both sides of the ball in special teams. Like, it's just not going to happen a lot.
This is kind of embarrassing. Like, what he does to this kid. He's toying with this kid.
That's some good separation. It's not bad.
Yeah, I'd say. Now, this is against, I think, Westlake, isn't it? This looks like Cole Klubnik's team.
Yep.
Look at that bot. Look at it. Watch him flip his hips here to catch this football.
Ball
and then get both feet down in bounds. Like, that's okay. That's a kid that's got loose hips and get his feet back down. That's impressive.
Mm-hmm. And punt return again.
Just
saw that crease early.
And when a kid can bring value in multiple phases of the game, not just as, he can run down and cover kickoffs, which is important, but like, I'm talking like he can bring you he can bring value to your offense and your special teams, meaning if he's returning and he's giving you 30, 40-yard returns from time to time, that's putting your offense in position to be successful. Yep. And that means he's impacting all three phases of the game. Here's an example. I'm catching like a DB. Good read. Watch, he knows where the route is, but he's still got his eyes on the quarterback.
It's just, I honestly hope everyone understands just how silly that change of direction is, though, because again, it's
hard for people to see that, Ryan, because he's so it looks effortless.
Yeah, it really does.
That's why I think it's hard for people to recognize how good he is, because it doesn't look hard. It looks like it doesn't look explosive. It just looks easy.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Looks easy. Yep. Everything looks so easy, and again, like the pedal needs improvement, and there's some things, but it's just so smooth.
Yeah,
out of his breaks, he's just so smooth. Change of direction,
and he gets to high. Look at that.
That's incredible. It's incredible.
That's just stupid.
He's again, playing that speed turn. That speed turn that's hard, man. That's hard.
He's playing the post over top, sees the quarterback, throw deep, and just, I'm going to make this play. I mean, it's just ridiculous. This is why I say, yeah, I know you have him ranked top 50, and that's impressive and everything, but I have a hard time believing there's 49 better football players in the country than this kid.
Yep.
I mean, he's
not many guys that could do that.
No. A little high on the tee. He's a high tackler. That is a part of his game that's going to have to definitely improve. And the other thing to think about too, Ryan, is we're talking about how he does all these things on offense and special teams. Like, this is stupid. He's playing the wheel route again. He does his job, stays on top of the wheel route, stays in phase, all that kind of stuff. Then he sees the quarterback still on the seam. He flips his hips and gets back and makes a play on this ball. This is just No.
This is what I'm talking about before when I said, though, when you have a guy with this type of range on the back end, you erase so many mistakes. So many. Not only does he handle his job, but then he makes this guy right.
Somebody screws up here, right?
Yep.
This DB, I don't know what this DB down here is doing, right? I don't know what this kid's doing. This guy is not getting up underneath that seam route. That linebacker is not getting up underneath that seam route. It's not happening. Somebody screwed up, but it's an incomplete pass because Peyton Bowen is a freak. And here's the thing. This isn't just about athleticism. Like, we're gushing over the athleticism. This is instincts. Because if he's not a smart football player, he doesn't know to do this. Just because you can physically do something doesn't mean you're smart enough or instinctive enough to know that you need to do it. That's the other part of this, that when we talk about just high football IQ, this is a smart football player. And that's, again, that's something that we can compare him to Kyle Hamilton in some of these areas, right? And one of them is Kyle is an instinctive, smart football player. Peyton is as well. This is not a great angle. This is what we're talking about. You want to beat him to the spot. He does not take a good angle to the football. He's going to have to do, or not to the football, excuse me, to the route, right? Because you're playing the route here, not the football. That's an area where, that's the thing, is there's a lot of room for improvement for him on defense, which is kind of scary.
Just look how explosive he is, though, changing direction there. It's he's shot out of a cannon. Which again, that example right there gives you some, like, hey, could he come down and can he play some man coverage for us if we're rolling guys down, if we're rotating, different possibilities again.
This is fun film to watch.
It really is.
It's really, after a while, it's kind of like, let's just stop talking and just watch this kid play.
Right.
But
we don't do it justice, to be honest. We just don't do it justice.
This kid, this is an area where, look, technique, it needs to be worked on. This is not great technique. He gets a little grabby. Because remember we talked about the exact opposite thing with Justyn Rhett. Justyn Rhett doesn't get grabby at all because there's a confidence in his technique. There's a confidence in his ability. Not that Peyton Bowen doesn't have confidence in his ability, but he doesn't always seem to have confidence in his, just the technique aspect of it, to me.
Right.
And that closing speed right there is ridiculous. I want to watch some film of his brother because I heard his brother's a pretty good player too. He's going to catch this kid.
He caught him at the 20 too. I thought at first I was like, oh, he's going to catch him at like the 5. Nope, he caught him at the 20.
That's just ridiculous. He didn't even get to the 20. He dipped out of bounds to the 21. Look at that.
When he missed that tackle, I was like, that he's going to catch him about like the 10 or the 5-yard line. Nope, he did not.
Yep, I like going low there. I didn't finish the point earlier. The fact that he plays so many parts of the game is going to keep him from bringing an incredibly fundamentally sound player as a DB, because this is ridiculous. Like, this is another one, like, oh, he's going to catch this kid at like the 30 or the 40 on the other side, and he doesn't get him to midfield.
Yeah.
But when you play so much of the game, you're playing safety, you're playing receiver, you're playing coverage and kickoff coverage, you're playing kick returns, you don't have time to spend every waking, breathing second working on your back pedal, right? Like a kid who's maybe a one-way player.
That's true.
So as a coach, you don't care. I don't care one bit. Like, his grade will get dinged a little as I'm doing my different grades, but like as a coach, as an evaluator, I give 0 rips about his terrible back pedal right there. 0.
For sure.
Because that's my job, right? That's what I get paid to do. And a natural athlete, I can get by the end of his first fall camp, or if he's an early enrollee, by the end of his first spring, that'll be fixed. And and if it's not, then they need to find a new safeties coach.
For sure.
And
it even goes even further than that, Brian, honestly, because I mean, obviously all the things that he's doing in practice that you're talking about, but also, I mean, most of these kids are multi-sport athletes. Like, they don't focus on football and just football, right? Like, when they get to college, that'll be a little different.
I'd be shocked, and I'm going to look this up as we're talking, but I'd be shocked. My mouse is a little crazy again. Sometimes my mouse just doesn't want to cooperate, and okay, here we go. All right. I'll be shocked if he's not playing basketball. I'm actually going to go look this up.
I think he is a basketball player. I think
Yeah.
I remember when I checked in with him, because that was the first piece I wrote when I came on Irish Breakdown as on the recruiting
You
side.
weren't even hired yet.
I know.
That's what I loved about Ryan. Is like, I was like, dude, you don't start till the 14th. Oh, it's all cool. I'll get this.
I was in Florida and everything. It was good times.
You were on vacation, calling Peyton Bowen to do a story, and you weren't even hired yet.
Nice kid, by the way. Nice kid.
Yeah, big time, big time. Let's see here. So yeah, this is a story this is the first official Ryan Roberts story. So I'm gonna pull this up here. The first story that Ryan Roberts ever wrote for Irish Breakdown. It's right here. So you to support your point that you were just talking about here. You talk about where is it down here? You say multi. Right down here. Bowen has been a multi-sport athlete for Geyer, competing in both basketball and track and field. So, yes, there you go, Ryan. You were correct. You remembered correctly of the article you wrote.
Yep, he had a pretty good 200 time for track and field nerds out there as a sophomore. 22:71 is a good, pretty good
11.3 as a sophomore for a long-limbed kids. Not bad at all.
Yep.
So this kid has this kid's really good. This kid's really good. So we're not done yet, because there's another really good safety on the board for Notre Dame that I would argue is a completely different kind of player, and that's Adon Shuler. And that's kind of something I like. Now, he's not going to be a guy that Ryan, that we're going to look at and be like, oh, wow, top 50 player and all that. His ranking's gone up quite a bit because he had a very good junior year.
Yeah.
Very good junior year. But, top 150-ish caliber player is definitely where I see Adon Shuler at this point in time.
Yeah.
Because I see a guy that's a great football player, but maybe not the elite athlete that the other two guys are. He's like 6 foot, like 185, 190 right now. Man, this kid can play football. This kid can really play football.
And like you said, he had a great junior year. He's kind of just a ball magnet, right? Like one thing that I always talk about is being reactive versus proactive. Reactive, you see it, then you run to it. Proactive, you saw it coming before it happens, right? Like that's kind of the proactive versus reactive. I think there's a lot of proactivity to a guy like Adon Shuler. He just sees the game really well. You can see that he understands spacing. He understands route combinations being created in front of him. He can see things based upon formations. All that stuff tells me that he probably is a film junkie at this point. I'm sure that he watches the game a ton. He understands the game, which the mental side is there. And then plus, like, let's not undersell. He's not, I mean, obviously he's not a Peyton Bowen type of athlete, but like he's a good athlete, obviously. And he's a good all around athlete. And I think he's twitchy. I think that there's a lot of good things with a guy like Shuler, but I think that his mental side is what really stands out for me.
Yeah. And I think what I liked about him as a junior is we saw a guy whose athleticism took a jump.
Yeah.
And that's what made him so much better. But that's why we lead with the first thing. When you talk about Adon Shuler, you're talking about a very natural, smart football player. This kid knows how to play the game. He really does. And I think he has good size for the position. Again, he's not a super long and rangy guy, but I've had friends tell me, it's like, oh, that guy's not big enough to play safety. And I'm like, he's 5'11", 200 pounds. Yeah. I'm like, buddy, go look at the NFL depth charts. There's 5'9", 5'10" safeties all over the NFL.
All over the place. If anything, safety's getting a little bit of a smaller position, honestly.
You want guys that can cover and stuff like. He's got good size for the position.
Yeah,
physical, right? He is. Now he's not necessarily. He's a junior high school, so he's not necessarily like incredibly like wow, Sean Taylor light you up like hits, but he is physical in how he plays.
Sure,
I love that. Top-notch route recognition. Again, two comments for him about smartness, being smart.
Yep.
And that's, again, a theme. Marcus Freeman's looking for kids that are not only top-notch athletes, but kids that are smart. And then that leads into point 5, which is a great feel for finding the ball. That's the thing I like about the two safeties. They are playmakers. Like, they make a lot of plays. And that's what made that 2018 safety tandem so good is Jalen Elliott and Loie Gilman both made a lot of plays on the football.
For sure.
And when you have two safeties that can make a lot of plays in the football, you're going to have something really good. And we talk a lot about the 2018 defensive line, which was great. And Drew Tranquil and Tavon Coney were really good linebacker tandem. And Troy Pride and Julian Love were one of the 4 or 5 best corner tandems in the country that year. the most underrated aspect of that defense was Jalen Elliott and Lohi Gilman. They were so good that year. And what you have here in these players is, because I think Adon, to me, my comp for him, and we didn't do comps for the other guys, my comp for Adon Shuler is he's a bigger, at the same age, a bigger version of Jalen Elliott, which is that's a good comp because Jalen Elliott's a pretty good football player in college. So he's thicker than, when I say bigger, thicker. He's a thicker version of what Jalen was at the same age. And Jalen was a quarterback in high school. Jalen didn't really become a DB till his senior year, so he's way ahead of him in that regards. But when I look at Adon Shuler, I just can't help but get flashbacks of what Jalen Elliott was at Notre Dame. Ryan, I don't know if you agree with that comp, but that's the one that just constantly sticks out for me. And even when I'm trying to think of non-Notre Dame safeties, I just can't help but he even kind of looks a little bit like Jalen. You know what I mean? Like, and you see him in the face, like same body type, same movement skills. I've tried to think of a non-Notre Dame comp, Ryan, and I couldn't come up with one that was better than Jalen Elliott for this kid.
Yeah. No, and I like the comp, so I'm going to defer to it, actually. And it's funny. I when we talk about interception totals, I feel like sometimes there's a lot of randomness to interceptions, right? Like there's not a calculable, quantifiable thing to why interceptions happen sometimes. But except for the fact that a guy like Adon Shuler is always around the football, and you can't undersell that. And the difference between what we just saw in Peyton Bowen comparative to Adon Shuler, Peyton Bowen's a guy where you could put him on center field, you could put him on the roof, a single high safety, and you could say, do whatever you do. Adon's much more too high type of safety, roll down. You could play some short zones. Maybe you can even play some man-to-man in certain instances, right? Like he's much more depth, but like, let's work up, while Peyton Bowen's like, hey, you can stay back there all day long and you can make whatever play you feel like making back there. But Adon's more like, you're kind of talking, you were talking about two safeties in Gilman and Jalen Elliott's, which were those two high guys. Like neither one of them were like super rangy guy, but they played so well together because they both could do things in two high sets, but also could both rotate down and do different things.
I don't know if either one of them, I'm not sure if you said this or not, but neither one of those guys were center fielders. Really. And they tried using Jalen a little bit more in that capacity in 2019, and it didn't work. It just, the second safety play wasn't as good. Jalen wasn't as effective. The nice thing I love about Adon and Peyton is Jalen and Elohi were really similar players, which is exactly what you were just saying. The thing I love about Adon and Peyton, again, I'm building on your point a little bit, I realize, but that complementary nature is they can both do everything, but one does one thing better than the other, in my opinion. Adon is a better alley player, run defender, screen game, like come downhill and wreck stuff. Peyton is more of a, like if you put that kid in center field, teams are going to be real hesitant to throw the ball down the field. We've talked about this in the Rose Bowl in 2020, where Mac Jones almost throws a pick early in the game because Kyle Hamilton almost jumps it. And he's like, maybe I don't want to throw deep the rest of this game. And that's what Alabama did. I mean, they throw deep all the time. They didn't throw deep again the rest of that game. Now, part of it is they didn't necessarily have to, but, they weren't willing to do it. And Peyton can have that kind of ability where Adon's the kind of safety where you look down at the stat sheet and you're like, oh, they could have 13 tackles.
Right.
It's like, okay. He's the kind of kid that when it's Navy week, he's like, oh, this is my week, because I'm going to have 25 tackles this week. Like that's the kind of kid that to me Adon Shuler is, right? Yeah. And before we move on this film, we did get asked, do you have comps for the other two? Because we didn't give those. So we went Jalen Elliott for Adon Shuler, which again I think really fits. Yep. What would be one that you would look at for Justyn Rhett, and what would be one that you would look at for Peyton Bowen?
A name popped in my head for Peyton, and it's not a perfect comp because I don't think that this player is a fantastic player in the run game, and I think that Peyton does have upside big time in the run game with the tackle radius he has, but there are some shades to how he can play in deep zone to a Malik Hooker that came out of Ohio State, like that type of rangy dude. Malik Hooker did not tackle a lick at Ohio State, but the things that he did in deep zone coverage playing single high was special stuff, and he had a great ability to play the football in the air, and he had just great ball skills, and he was a turnover machine at Ohio State his final year. So that's something I think that kind of makes a little bit of sense. Corner,
He was a first-round draft pick, though. I mean, it's not like you're comparing to the guy that was a bum.
Incredibly talented player. Incredibly talented. Unfortunately, injuries have kind of derailed his NFL career, but his last year at Ohio State, man, like I think he had like 6 or 7 interceptions, and all of them were like highlight, just rangy plays, working to the sideline, one-handed catches. Like, he was just such a good player his final year, and that's kind of what I see with Peyton as far as like the rangy aspect of him in deep zone. That's kind
I'm gonna stick with that program for my Justyn Rhett comparison, and I have a feeling this might be the first time you and I have a strong disagreement, because I for some reason I feel like you're not going to like this one.
Okay.
But when I think of Marshawn, I think of Marshawn Latimer, what he was at Ohio State.
Okay.
Like a bigger, like body type, bigger, like a physical guy that's got real good vertical speed. You know, like that's the kind of that's the name that keeps popping in my head when I think of, because Marshawn Latimer wasn't a big time recruit. He was a top 150 guy. I think people kind of underestimated how well he could run. And then of course he goes to Ohio State and he becomes a, first round NFL draft pick, right? Almost a top 10 NFL draft pick. And I would say Justyn at the same age is a little thicker than Marshawn was, but that would be my comp. I'm talking about the college version of Marshawn Latimer. That would be mine for him.
I actually don't disagree with it. And I honestly am probably not going to get a good Justyn Rhett one, because I think what makes it tough is that usually guys that are longer limbed and have that type of long speed don't also change direction very well. Right. And that's kind of what pops in your head with a Marshawn Lattimore. Like, that was one of the most uncommon things of him coming out of Ohio State, was like, man, he can really change direction like so well for a longer guy. So that's why Rhett, I think, is just kind of a harder one to find a really good comp.
I thought like, okay, similar body type to Minkah Fitzpatrick, but then I was like, but that's a different kind of athlete, different kind of role. Like, it just didn't fit. None of the ones that I kind of thought of when I started looking at body type really fit. The only one that fit from a body type and a game standpoint for me in recent history is Marshawn Latimer. That would be the fit for me. So Marshawn.
I don't know why his name popped in my head, but I sort of think of a D. Milner that came out of Alabama a few years ago. Like, with just body type wise,
speed.
Yeah.
I mean, even though D, I think I'll say this. I think the D comp that I like with where you're going with that is, I think the style of play is similar.
Right.
I don't think the athleticism is. I always felt D. Milner was an overrated player, in my opinion.
Oh yeah,
because
absolutely.
they allowed him to get away. Like D. Milner and the Alabama corners and the Michigan State corners during that era were allowed to get away with murder. Like, and then he went to the NFL and he couldn't just grab and beat people up, and he just was terrible. Yeah, and that's to me but I think that the body type and the physicality, that is because what is the first thing I think of when I think of D. Milner is him just pressing Tyler Eifert. I mean, just even Tyler Eifert in the championship game, he was like pressing Tyler Eifert. His ability. I think he was the DB that when Eifert almost caught that deep ball in bounds, he was so strong he could just kind of ride Tyler a little bit and not let him get that foot in bounds.
Yeah, he was a physical dude.
Yeah, and that I see that comp, that part of the game, but that's also what makes it difficult to do comps. Period, because. Because when you do a comp, people are going to just take everything that guy did, and if there's a part that doesn't matter, he doesn't do this one thing as well as that guy did, right? Okay,
right.
But that's the physicality aspect of that one. Yeah, I see that one. I like the Latimer one. For me, I like a little bit better. Plus, I didn't like. I got so frustrated watching D. Milner play, because I'm like, how is that not a penalty? And not in the Notre Dame game. I'm talking about just watching, games because I was coaching that year. I wasn't covering Notre Dame that year, so I would just tape games and kind of go back and watch them and just try to see some things. And man, this kid just holds and beats people up, and it's just like, man, come on now. I didn't like that, but so those are our comps, right? So those are our comps. Now let's get into a little bit of film because there's some really good. So little backstory. When Adon Shuler committed to Notre Dame and we did the show on him, I said, look, the kid's got some potential, but I'm curious how he jumps as a junior, because you could see the instincts. You could see the intelligence. You could see the playmaking abilities as a sophomore. What I was concerned about, to be honest with you, at the time, because when they got a commitment from him, he was still just a sophomore. My concern was, is this guy athletic enough to play at a place like Notre Dame? That was my concern as a sophomore. That's what was so nice to see from him as a junior, because as a junior, he answered those questions, in my opinion. Like, there's no doubt that he is athletic enough to play at Notre Dame after watching his junior film. I don't know if you had a chance to see the sophomore film, Ryan, and you can comment on that, but that was honestly my concern when they first got him was, is this a really good football player that just at the end of the day is not going to be athletic enough to play with Ohio State and Bama and Clemson and Oklahoma? That was my concern.
Yeah, no, and I think those concerns were warranted, to be honest with you, especially after our last show where you asked me to go back and just take a look a little bit at Brendan Vernon's sophomore film, just kind of see the difference. I actually did go back and watch Adon Shuler's highlights, and even out of curiosity as well, him being a New Jersey guy, I was just curious on how much he had developed, because I remember you mentioning something about that before, about the jump he took. So I agree. He looked like a completely different athlete from 2020 to 2021.
Now, when I see a kid, this is a really nice play right here. This is just kind of seeing the ball and just being in the right place at the right time, but also you have to have some instincts. I think the thing that first jumps out to me from when you compare him to the other two kids is he does not have the speed and explosiveness of the first two players we've talked about. He's not in that level, but I think he is able to maximize the potential, the speed and athleticism that he does have, because he's so smart. I mean, he's a really smart, and there's some good game film on YouTube. There's a couple games of him from YouTube this year, and you can just see it. That he's just like always around the ball, always around the ball. I mean, this is the kind of kid that you're like, you don't want safeties leading your team in tackles, and then you're like, well, but this kid just makes a bunch of tackles 4 yards down the field. He's making tackles on perimeter runs. He's making tackles in the screen game. He's blowing RPOs up, like this play right here. Like, it's, just seeing this route under. I'd like him to say a little tighter. He lets this kind of guy get over top of him, but he understands the need to cut this guy off. The angle is not great, but the feel for what he's doing is there, and then he's able to make a really impressive interception. I mean, that's a good catch, and then to be able to roll and get the ball, get the ball off the ground. It's an impressive play.
Yep, I think he has pretty good hands, to be honest with you. Yep.
Little bit tight. That's the thing I'll say about. And again, that's another reason. Jalen was that way. Was this a punt?
It looked like it. It looks a little wet. Looks a little wet out there. This is only
from the 25-yard line. It's like
he didn't even get hit either. He did not even get hit.
It just came out of his hand.
Not great.
Yep. But you can just see that transition is just a little bit. Part of it is his base is a little bit wide, right? But he has just a little bit of hip tightness there. Yep. But he earned his scholarship too, Ryan, because he's a kid that got his scholarship after he worked out at Notre Dame. He's another one of those kids that they like this film, but I think they had similar questions that I have. And then he comes to camp and he didn't run he didn't run like the 40 time that those other kids ran. This is a really nice play here. Really smooth. You can see a little bit of tightness in the transition, right there. Right. I don't think that's a technique thing as much as it's just he's a little bit tighter in that regards. Do you agree with that, Ryan, or not?
Yeah, no, I think you could especially see guys sometimes like their base is going to get a little wide, but also it's like they have to open and then they explode out of it instead of exploding out as soon as they kind of open up. And I think it's good that we watched Shuler right after we watched Peyton Bowen, because you saw an elite change of direction guy, elite range, and then you just see a good range, good change of direction.
You're seeing the difference between a top 50 player and a top 150 player.
Exactly.
That's it. But the thing is, and this is what I like about Adon's game, this play right here is exactly why he's a great compliment to Peyton Bowen. Because he's the guy that's going to come downhill and do stuff like this. Yep. I mean, like he hunts this like a linebacker, Ryan. And that's the thing. He is scraping and then sees the hole and then bam, explodes. And he's not a big kid.
Yep. And you want to talk about good vision, like sorting traffic right there. It's not easy, man. We have a pulling guard, right? We had at least one pulling guard. We have
a kick out, a pulling guard, and a sweep action.
Yep. So a lot of action there, a lot of traffic here, and he's able to sort it out. And then you can see again, last week we talked a lot about with Drake Bowen, the ability to create power in tight spaces. He took like 2 steps and he's able to really gain a lot of power in short.
This is another
steps.
one. This is when Adon Shuler is playing the football he loves to play. Like the interception he had a couple minutes ago, like we showed, like this is that football IQ that we love, right? Like sees this ball, makes a great play. Kid just always around a ball, right? But then you see stuff like this, and you're like, okay, this is where he's going to make his this is what I'm talking about. Like you don't want your safety to be your leading tackler, and then a kid like Adon Shuler's like, yeah, but I'm making so many at the line of scrimmage. It's like, oh, okay, that's all right. It's a little different in that instance. Because what I mean by you don't want a safety to be a leading tackler, because that usually means safeties are, usually making tackles way down the field. It's like that year that Kyle McCarthy had like 130 tackles. It's because they were getting past the first level of defense so often. He was kind of, cleaning stuff up. That's not the case with Adon. He's just this kid sniffs stuff out and and this is a big back. He's like, yeah, I'm not going to be stupid here. I'm going to go low and knock the ball out. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, how many forced fumbles has he already had? How many interceptions has he already had in this film? Like, this kid makes a lot of plays. Look at this. He does not have an angle to make this play.
At all.
This is a nice job by the corner down here to funnel this back inside too, by the way.
Very good.
Get off this block and come down. But yeah, he closes the pretty quickly and
comes with force.
Yeah. Yeah. He's very light on his feet, though. Again, we talked about he's not the explosive athlete that those other guys are, but he's very nimble. I will say that he doesn't plant his feet on the ground until he's about to hit you. But really loose feet. Tight hips, loose feet.
I love him running the alley, working inside out. It's awesome stuff.
He strikes me as the type in a hurry.
Absolutely, yeah. Shout out to the cannon heading downhill. He strikes me as a type of worker, right? That like at practice he'd be like, "Nope, one more rep. I'm not done yet.
Yes.
I'm not done yet." I wasn't happy with that. Wasn't happy.
Look how quickly he diagnoses this play. He's playing basically middle of the field. This looks like they're playing kind of like put him in the middle and like playing like a robber. Like this looks like a pistol option team is what I think this probably is. And they're just letting him run the alleys. You know what this reminds me of? This looks like what Notre Dame did. What was it? Was it Chinedum and Dukwe? Was like back in 05 and 06. Remember that?
So when you said kind of the pad in the stats against Navy a little bit, that's the first name because I remember didn't he have like 20-something tackles against Navy? Yeah, I remember that. Oh man, I used to love it, Dukwe.
Yeah, but they put Chinny like in the middle of the field. And they just said run the alley wherever the option goes, you go. That's kind of what it looks like they're doing here with him. Yep. And he just look how quickly he sniffs it out and just gets downhill. But he's patient with it, though. He's not coming out of control. He is. I don't know if there's a clip on here where I felt he was out of control.
Yeah.
And when I watched a couple of the games, about a month or so ago, same thing. He never looks out of control.
Right.
He's a very smart player, and then goes low and this kid's hunting the ball. This kid hunts the ball, Ryan. I love how he hunts the ball. This kid's fun to watch. And you know what I like about kids like this too is because he's not an elite athlete. Right. No. And he has to be smart and instinctive and play hard and do all that kind of stuff. Look at this little quick redirect. He's going inside it first.
And
sees
the corner.
Yep. Explain this one, Ryan, because this is about to be really bad. The corner makes a huge mistake. Talk us through why this shows a smart football player.
So you heard me a minute ago say running the alley. So that is the distance between the corner and then where your linebacker depth would be right inside there, right? So in a good world here, number 17, the cornerback is going to maintain outside leverage here on this block, and he's going to keep contained, allowing Adon Shuler to work right into that gap
again. He wants to force it inside. That's what contain means. He does not. This guy cannot let anything get outside of him. He wants to force it back inside where his help is. He has no help out here. His only help out here is the sideline. He's got 10 guys helping him inside here. So continue, Ryan.
Yep. And so 17 is going to want to stay outside, but unfortunately he peeks inside. You see that little peek in there. So he has lost contain now. So number 1 is going to go outside here. Fortunately, Adon is able to change direction and take a good angle.
You watch this. His first 2 steps, he is coming into the alley. He is going inside out on this screen, which is what he's supposed to do, inside out. This redirect to get outside and blow this up, it shows the football intellect that we're talking about. This is just, you studied the film, you're smart, you know your assignment, and you know your teammate's assignment, and you know he just didn't do his. So you got to cover.
And obviously number 1 bobbles the ball, but honestly though, 17's peaking. If Adon does not take Yeah, but if Adon doesn't even if Adon stays in the alley there, that is a big play potentially,
Yes.
which just kind of highlights how
with
big
a,
how
with a
nice of
clean
play it is.
throw, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
With a clean throw, if Adon doesn't recognize that his teammate didn't do a good job, that's a big play.
Yep. Again,
Just
working
hunting for a
inside
ball.
out.
Good
Working
Lord.
inside out. Yep.
That's a TFL. Like that. He's coming. He is at least, let's see here. That ball's on the 40. He's on the 40. So he's 8 yards off the ball.
Yeah. Yep.
And he makes this play how far behind the line? 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage.
It's not bad.
Nah, it doesn't suck. It doesn't suck at all. This kid's a good football player.
Yep.
You guys might want to think about trying to block him because he's blowing your stuff up.
We didn't even talk because we haven't seen any special teams film, but I mean,
now this is a better job by the corner, right? He goes outside, a little out of control, but he goes outside. He forces it back inside. That's what we were talking about. That's that contain thing.
Yep. Force him to your help. Force him to your help.
Not good block destruction there by the old defense for Irvington on that particular play.
Yeah.
Love that close. Now, this is kind of what we were talking earlier. Like, this is how we thought some of those Peyton Bowen plays would have ended up. Like, you make the tackle, but it's like, inside the 10.
I mean, it's great effort, though. It's an outstanding effort, to say the least. And, I mean, I don't know how that drive ended, but sometimes that's a, drive-saving play.
I love this angle, too, here because he stays on top of the kid.
Yeah.
Never lets him get him on the edge. Really nice play here. Because, look, if he goes too level, this guy bounces it outside, they could be in trouble. He's got this 51, this linebacker scraping inside. He doesn't have to go level. He can stay over top of him, and he makes a great play. This kid makes a ton of plays at the line of scrimmage. He's got some throwback to his game, too, Ryan. Like, this is what you used to see from safeties 10, 15 years ago, making a ton of plays at the line of scrimmage.
I love that color blue in their uniform, by the way. It's great, great blue.
He's a fun football player to watch for completely different reasons than some of those other kids.
Yep.
This is a kid that that at the end of every game, he's going to be one of those guys that is the most tired in the locker room because he's going to be on every special teams. He's going to just literally give you everything. Like there's not going to be anything left for him. Like he's emptying the clip in every game. I mean, he's not leaving anything in there. So that is the Notre Dame secondary. I mean, look, there's years in the past where Adon Shuler's your number 1 or number 2 DB in a class, including, this class. He's in the conversation for the number 2 DB in the class for me with Jaden Mickey. And in this class, I mean, he's going to clear third, right? Which speaks to the talent of this group. Your number 3 DB is going to significantly upgrade your safety depth chart. I mean, think about that, right? Your number 3 DB in this class is going to be a big boost for you. And that speaks to the talent of this class because Adon Shuler can play football. And that kid's a good football player. And when we should have watched him first, to be honest with you. It might have been more fair to him because you're comparing him to a guy that you and I believe is on some slight tech. You correct me if I'm wrong. Like for me, Peyton Bowen's got to improve his technical game to be a 5-star.
Well, I was going to say
talent-wise, he's
5-star athlete, 5-star athlete, for
no
sure.
question.
Yep.
And so Adon's never going to look elite when you watch him next to a guy like Peyton Bowen. Sure. But if we'd have watched him first, you're like, man, this kid's always around the ball. Like he makes a ton of forced fumbles, interceptions, TFLs. He's a disruptor. And to have a safety that's that disruptive, and that's what you want to see. Play from a good program. I believe they won a state championship this year, didn't they, Ryan?
They did. I think they went like 14-1 or 15-0, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah, they were really good this year.
And he was a big part of that. A very big part of that. So Adon Shuler, very, very good football player. Katie Keevers makes a really good point about this. She says Adon plays much faster than his 40. His football IQ coming from depth is elite. The ability to read what is in front of you, for instance, when the corner went under the block. You're absolutely right, Katie. I mean, that's the thing is there's football speed and then there's track speed. Don's never going to – like Jalen Elliott. Like, okay, Jalen was not a 4.8. Okay, Ryan, you and I talked about this the other day. I don't
Yeah.
know what happened at the combine, but Jalen, his entire career at Notre Dame was a high 4.5 guy, right? His whole
Mhm.
career. He's not a 4.8, but Jalen's not Kyle Hamilton. He's not
Right.
a 4.4. He's not Peyton Bowen. He's not that kind of speed, right? But he
Sure.
played fast because he especially as he got older, he got more comfortable playing safety. Alohi's a great example. Alohi plays like a 4.5 guy because he's so smart. He gets to the ball so quickly. And that's Adon. I mean, to me, that's Adon Shuler. I mean, he's going to, whatever speed he has, he's going to maximize it, which allows him to play fast. To Katie's point, I think she's spot on. I mean, that's the thing you like from that kid. And the thing I like about it too, Ryan, is again, he complements Peyton Bowen really well. They're two completely different safeties, but neither of them can only here's the danger. In today's game, you want to have some interchangeableness, right? So sometimes you could be too complimentary, where one guy's just an alley safety. Like you don't want a Zeke Mata in today's game. Zeke Mata was a really good safety for Notre Dame in 2012. He's a rover in today's defense. You can't have a safety like that, in my opinion. That's not Adon. Adon is a downhill guy that can play some man, but he can also play over top if you need him to, right? Like if you want to be able to keep your safeties left, right, because you're playing a team that's going fast, you can still roll him to the top. There's no problem. But he's maybe not as good at it as Peyton is. Peyton can play the alleys. We saw it. Does he play the alleys as well as Adon does? Not yet. Not right now. So, but the thing about both of them is they both get their hands on the football a lot.
Yep.
And that's the important thing. And that's what I love about watching those guys play. Those guys, all three of them, especially the two safeties, they get their hands on a lot of footballs, man. I mean, they are playmakers. And at the end of the day, if you're a great athlete but you don't make plays, it doesn't really matter. You're going to look great in 7-on-7 warm-ups. You're going to be great getting off the bus, but you're not going to help us win a championship if you're looking at it from a coaching standpoint. So that's our kind of thoughts on that. Ryan, do you have anything to add about these DBs and just kind of what we've seen from them?
I just love that, again, that the mission of the coaching staff on the recruiting trail has been, we need to get longer, we need to get more athletic, and it has clearly happened in the secondary. And again, if you look at Marcus Freeman's time as the defensive coordinator at the University of Cincinnati, that's how they were built. They are not a fantastic team when we're talking about the defensive line and the linebackers. They're not fantastic, but what they have is elite defensive backs, and that allows them to do so much in front of them. And I feel like that's really what we're seeing early on in the 2023 cycle, is the fact that Notre Dame has said, we need to get longer, we need to get more athletic. We went out and got Peyton Bowen, who can erase some mistakes. We went out and got Justyn Rhett, who could play some press coverage, who can do some things in zone, can do a variety of things. And I think that's going to make our second and first levels just so much more versatile and give us more opportunities to be attack style, to be a team that can create pressure, a team that takes chances. Like that gives you that opportunity, I think. And I think they're off to a great start with those three guys.
I mean, you look at Cincinnati's DBs, right? I mean, you start at the corners. Ahmad Gardner, 6'3", 200 pounds.
Yep.
Look at Kobe Bryant. Kobe's the small corner at 6'1", 198, right? Then you go to Brian Cook at safety, and where's he at? 6'1", 210. I mean, you look at the rest of the safety depth chart, and it's like 6'1", 197, 6'1", 205, 6'2", 192, 6'2", 200, 6'2", 205. Then you get down to the little guy, Jacob Dingle at 5'11", 195. That's their little guy, And it's like, yeah, you've got some stuff going on when that's your safety. Again, you talk about it's that length, just that supreme length. I mean, here's their cornerback depth chart. 6'3", 6'1", 6 foot, 6 foot, 6 foot, 6 foot, 6 foot, 6 foot, 5'11", 5'11", 5'10". And I'm pretty sure the 5'10" kid is a walk-on. I'm pretty sure. Yes, walk-on, prepped at Dublin Kaufman. Yes, I was correct. The 5'10" kid is a walk-on. That's doesn't mean you can't be 5'10" and really good. Julian Love is about 5'10". It's just, it's clear that that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that type of long guy. And where'd that come from? Who was the guy that built that roster? It was Marcus Freeman.
Yep.
And we've seen it. Benjamin Morrison fits that mold. Ryan Barnes fits that mold.
Certainly.
I think Philip Riley, to a degree, fits that mold because he's really long, even though he's not super tall. He's really long and physical.
Yep.
But then they're also open enough to where if a Jaden Mickey comes along who maybe doesn't have the length you look for, but he does everything else you love, ball hawk, physical, can cover, great feet. You say, okay, this guy may not have the length, but this kid can play football. And and that was something that I kind of was one of my concerns and criticism of Clark Lee was he would overlook a really good football player like the Jerron Thompson kid that's at Texas now, starting at Texas now at safety. They wouldn't take him because he was too small. He was he wasn't long enough. Well, you turned down a pretty good football player because he didn't meet your measurement requirements. I think the thing I like about Marcus Freeman is he has a type that he likes. Sure. And all the DBs in the 2023 class fit that mold. But if a kid comes along that he thinks can play, that has other traits that make up for it, they'll be willing to go for it. And that's the thing I like about what we've seen. So, yes, definite upgrade in length, definite upgrade in playmaking ability, definite upgrade in strength. And I would argue a definite, assuming they keep all these kids in the class, a definite upgrade in speed and athleticism as well. And that at safety, especially, because I think the future of athleticism at corner is better than people think. With Benjamin Morrison and Jaden Mickey and Ryan Barnes, and even Chance Tucker, Philip Riley, that's a pretty talented group of kids. You just got to coach them up, get them ready.
Sure.
But safety, DJ Brown, not the athlete, right? I mean, you don't have that. Justin Walters, not a great athlete, more of just a smart, heady football player. That's where you really need a jump in athleticism. And both of these kids bring that, Peyton Bowen and Adon Shuler. So far, so good. Now, as far as filling out the class, I think Notre Dame wants at least 2 corners in this class. That's the goal, is to get 2 corners. If there's a third that comes along that can play, that's just too good to pass up, or a guy that can play multiple positions like a Devin Moore, I think they'll take them. They definitely want a third safety in this class for sure. So I could see it, and especially with JoJo Johnson now out, I could see them easily going to a 6-man DB class again. Because look, losing Devin Moore, not replacing Devin Moore in this recruiting class, I think was it hurt to lose him, but it was smart not to panic and feel like you had to go get somebody to fill that spot that wasn't going to be the caliber of what they're going to get in 2023. Sure. I think that was smart. That's just my 2 cents. So I feel like they are now in a numbers position with all the guys they're going to lose to be in a position where they take 6. And when you've got this trio to start off with, you're in a great place to now build on that.
Good baseline.
Yeah.
It's good baseline to work
You don't
with.
want to hey, Caleb Downs, hey, you don't want to play with these 2 guys? You know what I mean? Right. Like
Malik Muhammad, you want to play? Yeah.
Come on down, buddy. Right, no doubt. So very strong group, no question about it. Now, tomorrow we'll be back at 12:30 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday. Friday we'll have our mailbag. Tomorrow we will talk more about the tight ends coach tomorrow. We'll dive a little bit more into that, and we'll talk some other team topics. But remember, this is a weekly show, right? We are going to be doing this most Wednesdays. There may be some times where one of us has some life that jumps up and gets in the way, and when we can't do it. But this plans to be a regular show from now and just kind of moving forward, where we're going to dive into some film. Sometimes they'll be longer like this because we're going to break down 3 kids. Sometimes we may just break down a kid. Hey, this kid got offered. Let's dive into this kid, or 1 or 2 kids. So, the length may vary from time to time, but this is what we're going to do. So make sure you kind of note this down, that we're going to be doing this Wednesday night. But also the easy thing is after you've hit the like button and after you subscribed, hit the notification bell, right? And then, nice little thing pops up like, oh, hey, Irish Breakdown's doing a show tonight at 8:00. What's the topic? Ooh, film room. All right. That's what I'm talking about. So that's why you need to hit the subscribe button. And of course, share it, because that helps us out, right? Anytime you like, you subscribe, you hit the, you share it. All that helps along with watching it. And if you talk about, I want to support you guys, but we're not in a place now. We've got kids. We've got this. We can't pay to be on your board. We can't pay to give you super chats. No problem. Make sure you watch the show. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you share and spread the word. And that's how you're also helping support us big time. So we like support from all types of ways. It's not just the financial support. All of it ultimately is financial support. And so that's a way that you can help us. If you're not in a position to kind of fork over the dough for the merchandise, which we have the merch store down below, to do the Built Bar, which, helps us out, to do, join the message board, which you can find the links below to that too. all those things. If you're not in a place where you can do that, this is how you help us. Watch the show, share it, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff helps us out. So thank you all so much for your support and everything you've done. Ryan, we had over 2.5 million page views in January on our message board and website combined.
Awesome.
It is truly amazing, the support that we've gotten. And stick with us because we've got a lot more coming. We do have a couple super chats that I do want to get to. Matt, 2011 GT, financial support. Thanks,
Respect.
buddy. Appreciate it. Got a couple more up here that we want to get to before we get out of here that were not recruiting related. So we'll get to those. Here we go. This is great. From Brian Kelly's best dance moves. Thank you for the super chat for that, by the way. No matter how this class ends up, Elise Freeman won't be making dance videos with recruits they don't end up getting.
So
I hope he continues to do that for so many different reasons, that he continues to not do that. Excuse me, talking about Marcus Freeman. I just thought the best part of that whole thing was that they didn't even get the kid.
I know.
Like, he's like grinding on this teenager and, embarrassing himself. And he's like, oh, it's the kids love it and it's good attention. I'm like, look, the expression that any attention's good attention that's false.
Yeah,
absolutely. Go ask Steve Bartman if any attention is good attention. Okay, I'm just saying.
True.
Right. So
well, that was the worst part on Twitter is I saw someone say like, "Oh, obviously it's working for him." Like, has it yet? We don't know that yet. Right.
The kid's going to Bama. The kid he did that with signed with Bama today. He's from Louisiana, right? That's the other part of it too. So, Michael S. real quick. Michael asked 2 questions. One, how would you compare the running back coach McCullough to former running back coach Tony Alford? I would say very similar. Traditional running backs coach as opposed to a Lance Taylor, who was more of a modern running back coach. When I mean modern, I'm talking about style of play modern, meaning, run, pass, route running, and all that. Coach McCullough and Tony Alford are definitely traditional running back coaches. Like, I'm teaching you to run, I'm teaching you to block, and we're going to catch some screens, right? You want to learn how to run routes? Go work with Coach Stuckey. You know what I mean? Like, traditional running back, and both strong reputations as strong recruiters. I would say is very, I think, very similar. And traditional similar backgrounds, right? Like, coach in the Midwest a lot. Coach Alford was at Louisville and Illinois. Chip Long was at Illinois. He was at Louisville. He was at Iowa State. Coach Alford was. And then of course came to Notre Dame. So very, very similar. And then number 2, Notre Dame seems to have a very easy schedule this year. Only 2 tough games. Worst should be 10-2. Your thoughts? Number 1. I think worst should be 10-2. That should always be the floor. I mean, that's to me the new floor for Notre Dame, barring an insanely tough schedule and injuries, right? Or just that weird year where you've got that really young team, kind of like Clemson had this year, or it's just that weird year where maybe you're not as good, but then you're going to bounce back the next year. I think 10-2 is certainly the floor. I don't think the Notre Dame schedule is a juggernaut. I think it's very top heavy. I would say it's definitely more than 2 tough games though. And I'm not even talking about USC. I mean, we'll find out what USC is. I'm not buying the USC's a title contender hype yet. I mean, I'm like, all these kids came from Oklahoma who went 11-2, right? Which is good. Barely beat Kansas, barely beat West Virginia, barely beat Iowa State. I mean, they were not an impressive team this year. And now all of a sudden these kids are going to come and turn a 4-8 team around and be a title contender. I don't buy it yet, but they're going to at least be a lot better than they were last year. I think the team people are overlooking is BYU.
Yeah,
I think BYU on a neutral field out in Vegas, that's a good football team. They won 11 games last year. They won 10 this year.
Jaron Hall, quarterback, coming back.
Yeah. And the thing about BYU too is BYU this year went 10-3. They beat Arizona. They beat Utah. They beat Arizona State by 10. They went on the road and beat a ranked Utah State team. They beat Washington State on the road. That was a bowl team. Washington State was, I believe, or did they fall apart at the end? I can't remember what.
I think
they went to a bowl game. Yeah, they went 7-5 and went to a bowl game. That's right.
Beating Utah was a good football team this year,
and they beat them by 9. They beat them by 9, and then they beat USC. So you had 1, 2, 3, 4. They had 5 Pac-12 wins this year.
That's crazy. It's crazy.
That's nuts. So I mean, it's and they beat Virginia. So BYU went 10-3, and they had 6 wins over Power 5 teams. Their losses were to Boise State and at Baylor, the Big 12 champ, right? I mean, so and the Sugar Bowl champ. I mean, so that was the regular season losses. That is a good football team, and then you pointed out, Ryan, they're going to have a lot coming back next year too. So I would not just dismiss BYU as a chalk it up as a W. Should Notre Dame beat BYU? Yes, they should.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be an easy game? No, it is not. And
No.
so I do think the schedule is a little top heavy though. But I would say if you are basing it off of the 2021 schedule, it's going to look not soft. I think we have to take a couple things in consideration though. USC changing, the turnover at USC.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about Baylor. I think Clemson's going to bounce back a little bit, but the team that I think is going to be a lot tougher than people think is BC. BC lost Phil Dracovic for most of the season. I mean, you look at the games that they played early before he got hurt. I mean, he looked good the first game and a half before he got hurt.
Yep.
And they lost like 4 in a row after he got hurt. Like they won their first game, right? Yep. And then they lost like 4 or 5 games in a row when he came back. And yes, 4 in a row. They lost to Clemson, NC State, Louisville, and Syracuse. And then they beat Georgia Tech. They didn't play well against Florida State and Wake down the stretch, but like they were a different team with him in the lineup than they're not a 6-6 football team if Phil Drakovic's in there. The thing that surprised me was Zay Flowers coming back. So he's going to have a big time. I mean, he's going to be one of the 4 or 5 best receivers on the Notre Dame schedule. And I could be underselling it a little bit, Ryan. I'm being generous because I know Ohio State's got at least 2. And, I'm trying to think through the schedule. Mario Williams, you know what I mean? But Zay is going to be in that conversation. That is a good football player.
It was very frustrating. I actually watched one of the games where Dracovic did not play I was scouting one of the offensive linemen because they got a ton that are coming out this year. And it was so frustrating because Zay Flowers is open all day and they just could not hit him, man. Like,
is that the NC State game?
It may have been. I don't even remember. I put a highlight on Twitter because I was just like, Zay's wide open and it's just a terrible overthrow. And it was just all
NC State and Louisville were the 2 for me that I remember watching, thinking like, this kid's getting open and they're not getting the ball.
Yeah,
it was bad. So they're going to have some good talent next year. I think Jalen Gill's back.
Yep,
they're going to be a tougher game. Again, should Notre Dame lose at home to BC? No. It's just about, but it doesn't mean that it's, and then you play them right before you're about to go out and play USC in the Coliseum. So I think the schedule is going to be tougher than it looks on paper right now. And so when people say Notre Dame doesn't have a tough schedule next year, I don't get real mad about it because I understand why they're looking at it. Because Notre Dame has a 10-3 Clemson, 10-3 BYU, and 11-2 Ohio State. After that, your next best team is like Marshall at 7-6 as far as record this past season. I just think some of these teams are going to be a little bit better than people think. North Carolina will not be on I think they're going to be better than people think list. Although they did finally get rid of Jay Bateman. I thought the Gene Chizik replacement was kind of like I didn't quite understand that, but It is what it is. But it's going to be a challenging schedule. It's not a juggernaut though. This isn't going to be 2017 schedule. It's not going to be that. Where you're playing like 7-8 ranked teams by the end of the year. But it's going to be a challenging schedule. It's going to be more than just 2. So, and the reason I say that is because if Notre Dame does go 10-2 or 11-1 next year, am I going to be happy? No, because it's Notre Dame. You should, championship should be the objective. But can you look at it as another year of progression? Yeah, you could make a case for that depending on how the season plays out. But I think it also would kind of, if you go 10-2, there's probably going to be a couple really good wins in there. This isn't going to be like going 10-2 where, like in 2015 and your only win over a ranked team, your 2 best wins were Temple and Navy. Like literally in 2015, your 2 best highest ranked wins were over Temple or Navy. So if you say, well, you lose to Ohio State and Clemson, it means you beat USC, means you beat BYU, means you beat BC. If you lose to Ohio State and USC, that means you beat Clemson, BYU. If you lose to, Clemson and USC, you means you beat Ohio State, right? Means you get the point. There's going to be some really good wins in there. But I mean, look, I'm not going to start lowering the bar just because the current head coach doesn't disgust me like the previous head coach does. My holding Kelly to the bar that I held him to wasn't because I disliked him. It's because this is where you should be when you're this deep in your program. And so my bar is not lowered because they have a new head coach. The new head coach is being brought in to take you to the next level.
Sure.
So that's kind of where I'm at. But that's a good question, Michael. I appreciate you answering it. And I think that is all for the Super Chats tonight. So Everybody, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Ryan, thank you for joining us tonight. I know you had to put your baby to bed probably before you started the show and then come join us. So I appreciate that very much. We'll be back next week. We're most likely, barring some news coming that makes us want to watch some different film, we'll watch some Cedric Irvin and Cooper Flanagan film next week, and then kind of preview what our schedule is going to be like after that. We'll start diving into some film of the boards. We'll kind of maybe go through a few weeks where we break down all the receivers that Notre Dame's looking at and some of the offensive linemen and things like that. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, get some Built Bars, best protein bars in the business, and it helps support our channel. Check the merch store. Got a lot of new stuff in our merch store. This is not in there though. I think this is just for me for right now. But we have some IB Nation stuff. Have some new colored hats that people have asked for. A lot of good stuff. You see the flag that I got over here, and the one that Ryan has over there. That's in the merch store. Did your wife get the blanket yet?
Yes. Yeah, we just got it this morning.
That thing is super comfortable. Yeah, I'm gonna have to let me know what she thinks. My mom, I got one for my mom, and she's like, I want 4. She had my wife make them specially, like with my nieces and nephews, got like their names on them. So it was really cool. So check those out. That's in the merch store, which has a link below. The sign up to the message board is below. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the notification bell, share, and thank you all so much for watching the Irish Breakdown podcast.